I won't stop raving about him. I think he did a really good job here at the Combine, is DJ Giddens from Kansas State. I love this kid. 6 feet, 212 pounds. We got a 4.4, 340, 39.5-inch vertical with a 10-foot, 10-inch broad jump. Again, talking about the explosiveness in the lower body. So I think Giddens is a great job. I think he's a guy that's going to go somewhere, possibly day 2, early day 3. I think he's a potential to be a steal there for a running back. RJ Harvey, this kid out of UCF. I saw him at the Senior Bowl, caught my eye. I've liked him ever since then. 5'8", 205. He's more of a committee kind of back, more of a guy that can play off of a starter. But 5'8", 205, ran a 4.4 40. Another one with 38-inch vertical. Also a good solid pass catcher out of the backfield. Trevor Etienne is a guy I've liked for a long time, going back to his days when he was at Florida. Went to Georgia. 5'9", 198. Not a bell cow. Not someone that's going to be give him a ball 20, 25 times a game. But a guy that can come in here and complement. If you're looking for a complement to DeAndre Swift, he could be potentially a guy that come in here 4.4, 240, 1.5, 110-yard split. Damian Martinez is a guy that I've just started diving into his tape. I think that's a guy that's on my list. One of the listeners asked me to go and scout him. I'll be posting up a scouting report on him eventually. But Damian Martinez from Miami, 6 feet, 217 pounds, bigger back, type of running back, 4.5, 140. That's a pretty good run number there for a bigger back. Obviously, at 1.56, 10-yard split. He's a guy that transferred from Oregon State. 1 year at Miami, he had 159 carries for 1,000 yards, 10 rushing touchdowns. So again, a guy that can come in here and talking about being a complement potentially to DeAndre Swift. Damian Martinez could be fill that need there.
Back on offense, Ashton, Jeanty, breaks free. Has a player tracking him down. It's TJ Smith. Can he get to him? Jeanty, touchdown, get out of town. 75 yards, a new school record, 6 touchdowns.
Ashton Jeanty wants to play for the Chicago Bears. That's what he said 3 weeks ago.
Those Chicago Bears sitting pretty nice at 10.
Hey, y'all hear that, Chicago Bears?
I think that might be a nice destination.
I think that'd be a good idea by Ben Johnson kicking off his Bears coaching career. Get Ashton Jeanty in the backfield.
Yes, I met with the Bears.
At the Combine, he cited his meeting with the Chicago Bears, saying that things went especially good with new running backs coach Eric Bieniemy.
It went great. Talking with Coach Bieniemy, just talking football, talking about my life. It was a great meeting. It was a great meeting with all of them.
Jeanty also cited his skills and how he can help NFL football teams, including the Bears.
I'm a real, physical runner, explosive, real shifty, make guys miss, and just versatile. Yards after contact, just being able to break tackles, make plays down the field.
Jeanty, looking to go! Ashton Jeanty, still on his feet, and he's down in the 5-yard line!
But of course, it's highly unlikely Jeanty will be drafted by the Chicago Bears because they have such big holes to fill in the trenches. And it doesn't help Jeanty coming to the Chicago Bears, given that the running backs in this draft are deep.
Here's Hampton, straight to the middle, look out! Now it's a foot race.
How aggressive will they be in the final seconds? Henderson can take a house call from anywhere. And look out! He goes right down! Kobe and Henderson! Third down, they try to run for it and breaking free. Dylan Sampson in a foot race. Dragged down inside the 5.
Caleb Johnson, the tailback. He'll get the call. Caleb, big opening on the outside. Caleb Johnson, sideline and gone. Touchdown, Iowa. Judkins gets it. Left end. Judkins. He's got it again. And up to Martinez. Uses the stiff arm. Breaks away. Damian Martinez. 10-5 touchdown.
Now, if Ben Johnson says to Ryan Poles, I really want Jeanty at number 10, I've got a plan to unleash his skills that could make us an offensive powerhouse. Please find me some veteran offensive linemen in free agency and supplement that in the draft. Maybe, who knows? Maybe Jeanty does become a Chicago Bear. Aldo Gandia for the Barroom Network. Hey, what's happening, everyone? Welcome to Bear Stuff. My name is Aldo Gandia. I'll bring Danny in just a minute. A couple of things I want to share first. I was on the Irish Bear Show earlier today and had a great discussion with the host of the show, Kieran Hall, and his other guest was Brendan Shagru from Bears Wire. We had a great time talking football for a little over an hour. So if you haven't heard of the Irish Bear Show, they're very active on X channel. They got a great YouTube channel, so go over there and give them a follow if you haven't, or if you are following them. Check out the show that I was in immediately after this. That's what I want you to do. So the other thing I want to just share with people is this is a great time to be a Bears fan. And I've said this before in previous years, and it was a major disappointment. But this time, for me, it just is starting to feel really, really special. That's going to be one of the main topics I'll talk to Danny about, is just the vibe that us fans are getting from Ryan Poles and Ben Johnson and the players that they are acquiring. Now, I've been very, very critical of Ryan Poles and thought that he should have been relieved of his duties at the end of the season, almost as penance for how he screwed things up. But it does appear to me that he is repairing the problems that he helped to create, that he had a big role in creating. And the first thing that he did was the hiring of Ben Johnson. I truly believe that people work better as teams as opposed to individuals. And so now Ryan Poles and Ben Johnson appear to me to be a genius, a two-headed genius at acquiring players. At least that's how I feel now. When opinions change, right, with new information. So we'll see what happens down the line. But I'm encouraged by what's happening, and I hope all of the Bears fans are too. J2K says, Kieran is such a great guy. I'll definitely check it out. Yes, Kieran is a great guy. Off camera, he shared some incredible stories that I'll have to have him on the Barroom Network so he can share those publicly. All right, without further ado, let's not keep my buddy waiting anymore. His name is Danny Shimon. Danny, guess what I'm rocking today? I think it's the same thing you're rocking.
Hey, thank God you're wearing pants. That's all I got to say.
Exactly. It's not always the case.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that shirt. For those who don't know, that's my my logo for my YouTube channel, Shimon Draft Scout. I know a bunch of you guys are already on there, and I got about 13, 15 videos out there about prospects. I started with the trenches, the offensive line. Now I'm into defensive linemen, and then soon we'll be going into the running backs. I was waiting for free agency, see what happens here. So soon I'll be going to running backs, and then some tight ends, and then eventually receivers, and then you guys let me know what you guys want. You guys want safeties? You guys want linebackers? After that, you let me know. I aim to please the listeners here, and so that give me players, give me positions, and we'll break it down.
Well, and that's the challenge for everybody that's evaluating, because of the moves that the Bears have made with trades and free agency. It's like anything could potentially happen. I mean, we could get, I think it's unlikely you'll see a running back in round one, but you're going to see a running back, at some point. You're going to see, potentially a tight end really early. And so the guys that we normally wouldn't scout, or you normally wouldn't scout because they're first round picks, you got to scout those guys now, right?
Yeah, with what they've done so far in free agency and with trades and all that stuff, it's like, I tweeted something out, like, something I didn't think I was going to tweet out, 2 weeks ago, which is, even at number 10, possibly like a Tyler Warren, the tight end from Penn State, could be a possibility here. Not that I'm advocating for going for a tight end number 10, but with Ben Johnson, some of the creativity he wants to do here. I mean, Tyler Warren is a toy that he could utilize. This is a former quarterback. He can throw it. He can catch it. He can run with it. So it's a nice little toy if you want to give Ben Johnson some options there. But obviously, I'm similar to you. I am very happy with the way they've started off free agency. We've been pounding the table, yelling, from the top of our lungs here. We want to attack the offense, defensive lines. I think they started off great. Don't stop. You still want to keep adding to this, and that's the thing as I wanted to kind of keep going forward here is just relaying that you can never have enough offensive linemen, you can never have enough pass rushers and defensive linemen as well. So I know we'll get into it here as we go on and show, but it's a good start, but don't stop, keep going.
Exactly. Absolutely agree. All right. So this is how I've mapped out today's show is that Danny and I are going to listen to some of the sound from today's press conferences and then react to that. And then we'll get sort of into the main theme, which we've already introduced at the beginning of the show here, which is how are these acquisitions of players that we were introduced today, and Drew Dahlman, who didn't do a press conference today, but I assume he's going to do one soon. How are these players going to impact the Bears draft? And we'll also do it in kind of hopefully what I think will be a fun way. I did a little thing with Danny, do or don't. Danny, are you going to do this or not do this? Don't do this. So we'll play that a little bit later. First, let's go on to the press conference. Danny, did you get a chance to hear it? Any of it?
I did.
Okay. So none of this should be new to you, correct?
Correct.
All right. So the press conference started with Ben Johnson and Ryan Poles at the podium or at the desk, and both of them started to address questions. But before that, Ryan Poles had an introductory speech on the players that have been acquired, and then he added this.
The beautiful thing about this is we both have connection points with these guys, which makes it really good. We know the type of men that they are that are coming into our building, and we're really confident they're going to enhance our entire team and our locker room. I'm proud of the preparation that went into this, our process, as well as our communication between Ben and I, our staffs, and then most importantly, our salary cap folks who took, they had some heavy lifting in this one too. So, part of our process that a lot of people don't know, we spend probably bi-weekly, we'll get together to talk about our finances and where we can spend and kind of how much flexibility we have. And that was really started by Kevin. And with that openness, it allows us to jump on these opportunities to enhance our football team. And I don't take that lightly at all. So that communication and that collaboration has been huge.
Danny, I wanted to make sure to share that soundbite with you and everyone else because it does show that the team is working as one, and the fact that Kevin Warren introduced the idea of let's talk about the economics, what's available money-wise as we're building this roster and so forth, that to me makes perfect sense. I've worked for large corporations that we've taken that same approach. We have weekly or bi-weekly or monthly meetings to talk about certain topics, and it appears that the Bears are doing that, and they're doing it in unison. Did you get the same impression that I got, that was a good sign as to where the team is headed?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing about Ryan Poles, and you and I have been huge critics of him, but he's one guy that he won't deviate and do what Ryan Pace did, which is have draft a quarterback and not even tell his head coach what he's doing. That's him. Even going back with Eberflus, that right there is alarm bells right there. But even with Eberflus, Poles was always, collaborative, was always communicating with them. And you could tell even with the Hard Knock stuff over the summer, we saw him always include Eberflus in the coaching staff. And so that's one thing about Ryan Poles. He believes in that whole, get everybody's opinion and kind of come to a collective agreement. But the one thing that, don't get it twisted here. If Ben Johnson didn't want Jonah Jackson or Joe Tooney or Ode, the defensive end, or Grady Jarrett, they won't be on this roster. So it's Ben Johnson and his staff that is saying, all right, Ryan Poles, this is who we like. This is the kind of player we like. These are the kind of athletes we want, so on and so forth. And now Ryan Poles and his staff are going and, they're a good job with them in terms of, keeping your ear to the ground and hearing that Grady Jarrett possibly could have been a cap casualty, because that happened in the morning, and by the evening or afternoon, I should say, he was already signed to a contract. So that's already they've laid the groundwork for that. They knew that was coming potentially, and they were ready to jump on it and get him signed, seal and deliver, and bring him here, to the Bears. So.
Yeah, that whole story about Grady Jarrett making it to the team, we'll look more in depth on it in just a moment. But that was a fascinating story, and also he's a fascinating human being. He's the type of guy I would do whatever possible to help him in whatever way. He's the guy you want in your foxhole. He's the guy who is going to help me. And when I'm in trouble, he just has a fantastic attitude about the game of football and life, and we'll get into that momentarily. But I do want to go in some kind of order here, chronological order as to what happened at the press conference. This is Poles talking about Jonah Jackson, and of course the concerns that immediately fans shared on social media and have been talking about since. People are a little bit more comfortable with the acquisition of Jonah Jackson, but he was asked about what kind of work they put into researching Jonah and whether he is capable of becoming the Pro Bowl alternate type player that he was with Detroit under Ben Johnson.
Yeah, just there was a position change. He started out playing center. That's out of, you can ask him about it, but that's out of position. So it just started up a little bit choppy. But when you go back and see when he was in Detroit, I go all the way back to Rutgers when I watched him. The guy is made of the right stuff, and he's capable of really helping us up front, anchoring, but also getting pushed in the run game.
Yeah, hey, the guy's a Pro Bowl caliber guard, so that's what we're going to get out of him.
There's some people in the chat room who are commenting on Ben's facial expressions in the clip I played before. Well, what if you were concerned at all, the fact that he just jumped in there and basically said, like with an iron fist, this guy's a Pro Bowl player, and that's what we're going to get. It's just so impressive. This guy isn't just an offensive genius. He commands a room when he talks. What were your impressions out of the whole Jonah Jackson?
And there are a couple of clips. Hopefully, we'll get to them later on with Ben Johnson as well. The first thing I thought about watching this press conference was, remember the Ben Johnson at introductory press conference, and remember the one at the combine where all smiles and jokes. No, Ben Johnson's got his game face on. Ben Johnson now is creating the roster that he wants for this first season as a head coach, and you could tell it was already in there. He was already in that focus. And one thing, Poles went back and forth in terms of Jonah Jackson. Again, guys, this is not a Ryan Poles guy. Jonah Jackson is a Ben Johnson guy. He spent the 2 seasons with them in Detroit, and right there, Ben Johnson came on and said, "This guy's a Pro Bowl right guard. That's what he's going to give us. He's going to give us a Pro Bowl right guard." So, if there's any doubt for whatever reason out there, this was a guy that Ben Johnson wanted, and Ryan Poles went and got it for him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's I think it's always been the approach by Poles to get the players that his head coach wants.
Yep.
Problem was, of course, with that Matt Eberflus put too much value on some problem areas, so they draft 2 defensive backs, and you were against it. I was battling you during the draft when that was up, because I was saying he's paying attention to the board. If the board says it's better than a trench player, then draft the guy. Well, I was wrong. You were right. They needed to pay attention to trench players and at least pick up guys who were developmental prospects and may not have been ready to contribute immediately. So this is a different approach now, and I think that it's because of Ben Johnson is leading the way.
Exactly. And that's the thing is, like, he's the guy coming here, even taking the job. I mean, a lot of people say follow the money. And if you do that, right, you've been in business before, the person making bigger bucks usually has a bigger say. And I hate to bring it down to salary, but if you take a look at, what Ben Johnson's making compared to what Ryan Poles is making, I understand, Brian Poles has the general manager position and the title, and that he will do his task. But this is Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson said this. He had a vision for how he wanted to run this, his team, his first head coaching experience. And he just came in, he talked to Ryan Poles, said, "This is what I want to do. If you've drafted a guy last year, 2 or 3 years ago, whatever, in the 3rd round, and if I don't want him, he's gone. And Ryan Paul said, that's right. If you don't want him, doesn't fit your system, he's gone. And so this is how typically good organizations work, right? The general manager doesn't force. You cannot force a player on a coach or a coaching staff, because that player, that's bad for the player and that's bad for the coach, because that player will languish on the bench and he will never get played if the coach doesn't like him. So there's no way you could do that. Now, going back to what was previously here in terms of the coaching, he was that Eberflus was in over his head. Eberflus had no concept in terms of what to do on offense. He just plucked an offensive coordinator who was also inexperienced, first-time play caller, who really had no idea in terms of what he needed. Whether it's Luke Getsy or Shane Waldron, these were guys that were in a system, in a scheme that they were taught, and this is what we need. And so so offensively, these guys were given to Ryan Poles. Say, all right, so Poles now is kind of saying, all right, what do I get here? He listens to what the offensive coordinator wants and brings him. Head coach had no really say, other than maybe a defensive line guys or something like that. That was more of his forte, Matt Eberflus, that is. But no, Ben Johnson, he said, he's going to have his hand on everything, right? Now, Dennis Allen's going to be, in charge of that defense, but Ben Johnson's going to know what kind of players Dennis Allen wants. He's going to know what kind of players that he wants to bring into this organization and what kind of culture they want to bring. And that's one thing hopefully we'll touch on later on. But, a couple of these acquisitions was the culture that they're bringing and culture that they're building. And if you guys want to take a look at blueprint, look at last year with Dan Quinn, way there with Washington. He brought in a bunch of veterans that were on other teams, Bobby Wagner and Deontay Fowler and some of the other guys, that came in and not big name or not, multi-million-dollar, contracts and all that stuff, but guys that set the culture in that locker room. That's so important. And I think that helped propel what the Commanders did last year. And I think hopefully, maybe we'll touch on it later on, but these guys that brought in here, not only are they good players, they are tone setters. They are culture setters. And that's what happens in these locker rooms and successful locker rooms.
Yep. Cliff Victoria's got an early meeting tomorrow, so he's saying goodbye to everybody. We'll say goodbye to Cliff. Thanks for always tuning in as you can. Hope you catch the rest of the show tomorrow morning or whenever you can. All right. You were talking about culture, and he was asked, he being Ben Johnson, was asked about that by Brad Biggs. And I thought that Brad, really framed the question in a really good way, basically saying what Danny was just saying, that these veteran players, he was asking in the form of the question as opposed to what Danny was saying more declaratively. He was asking, how can these guys really help these veteran players that you've brought in? How can they help the culture of this team? Because as Brad Biggs said it, you really can't build a positive culture if you're losing every game.
It's a losing culture. It's a losing, and we've said it multiple times, right? It's a losing culture.
That's right. So when Eberflus is at his press conference talking about the culture and the team is 1-5 or whatever it is, it's like, screw you, dude.
It was a losing culture. Yeah, that's the thing is Eberflus didn't know it was a losing culture.
That's exactly right. All right, this one's a minute long. This is Ben Johnson responding to Brad Biggs' question on culture.
This is a guy for a number of years now that's played at a fantastically high level. Like, this guy is outstanding. You feel his presence. He's a guy you have to game plan for when you go against him. I know when I was in Detroit with Jonah, we talked like, this is a guy that you come out of the game and you're sore because you played against him. He's relentless. He's passionate about what he does. Just talking to him today gave me goosebumps, because this guy loves football and he's going to bring that element to the team. All three of these guys, they've been in the playoffs. They've won playoff games. Joe in particular has won Super Bowls. Yeah, that does rub off to the rest of the locker room, because we're gonna define what it's gonna look like in terms of our meeting process, our walkthrough process, our practice habits, what it looks like off the field, because that all translates to winning on the field. All three of these guys have done that at a high level.
I could have done a better job of setting up that soundbite. He, of course, was talking about Grady Jarrett at the beginning there, and I love that when he said that when he's talking to Drew and other players would say that after facing Grady Jarrett, they were sore the next day. So that was fantastic. So culture is huge, and bringing in these players is really helping them, move the needle towards winning Super Bowls.
Yeah, now you have people in these meeting rooms that will set a tone, that will hold people accountable. Coaches, and players, more importantly, right? Because once the coaches, I think in his introductory press conference, Ben Johnson said that, him and his coaching staff are going to help implement the culture, and then it's incumbent upon the players to bring in to help then grow the culture. And I think guys like Grady Jarrett, Joe Tooney, these guys are veterans. These guys have won. They've experienced playoff success before, and these guys are going to the offensive line room got so much better with just these two there. These two, with Joe Tooney and Juwan Jackson in there. The defensive line room is going to get so much better in terms of what, Grady Jarrett brings in there. You got young guys in there, right? You got Gervon Dexter, you got Zach Pickens, you got, even Montez Sweat, he's not really an old grizzled veteran, and Ode, the defensive end. He's only 25 years old, going to be 26. So even though he's a 4-year veteran, he's still relatively young as well. So, someone like a Grady Jarrett that we heard him today, he's loud. He's a guy that commands a room. He's going to command that defensive line room. Joe Tooney, who's more of a mild-mannered guy, more of a lead by example kind of a player, but he's a guy that, don't get me wrong, if he needs to set an example on a player, he will go ahead and set the example, because you know what? He's got the rings. He's got the experience. He's got the all-pro accolades to players that listen to him. So the one player that I think gets kind of mixed in the shuffle here that people are maybe overlooking, and in terms of his growth this next season, is look at Braxton Jones. How much better he's going to be having an all-pro like Joe Tooney next to him.
Yeah. Indeed. And Braxton's name came up a lot during the press conference, which gave me a little hope that perhaps his rehabilitation is going well. One of the things that I was concerned about regarding that rehabilitation is that it was an ankle injury, and he has to work on that lower body strength. And so how much has he been able to do, having to also rehabilitate from an ankle injury, which could take a while? And there's some concern, at least by, not people close to the organization, but by pundits and so forth. Is he going to be ready for camp? Is he going to be ready for game one and so forth? And that's a topic of discussion when we start talking about the draft. That's a topic of discussion. How important now is this left tackle position, or are you going to be comfortable with Karan Amagaji and a recovering Braxton Jones? It's a big topic.
The one thing I will say about left tackle, and obviously, this is the first time, to my knowledge, that Ben Johnson acknowledged Braxton Jones as one of the starting five, right? Yeah. So that's huge, and I agree with you. I caught that as well, because he's talked about Darnell Wright before, in terms of what he likes in terms of his physical ability and his athletic ability. But this is the first time I heard Braxton Jones' name. But the one thing about Karan Amagaji, and I hear it on other shows and all that stuff, the kid got a bad rap, and don't, please, everyone, do not judge this kid based off what happened last season. That was so unfair to Karan. Now, he could end up being a bust. I'm not saying he's going to be a starter or a 10-year player, but he could be a 10-year starter in this league, because just do not judge Karan Amagaji about what happened to him last year. That was so unfair. The kid had no OTAs, no training camp, basically. He was recovering from an injury, and then he just gets thrown into the fire like that. In a hostile environment, one of the most hostile environments in football in Minnesota, on the road, one of the more complicated defenses, more aggressive defenses in the Vikings, and then no help whatsoever. That was just unfair to the kid. So let's just give him a shot, give him a clean slate, right? And let's see what he does here this year. Hopefully he stays healthy, and then we can see, because he's got the tools, he's got the size, he's got the length. So let's see what this kid can do here. So I'm not giving up by any means on Karan Amagaji.
You used the word unfair towards Karan Amagaji. This, I think, is an unfair question to you from Vince. He asked, Danny, would you re-sign Braxton after this year? You got to see how he plays this year, right?
Exactly. You got to see how he plays, right? And you got to see how he recovers from the ankle injury. So we'll see how it goes. But if he has a great year and then you want to lock him up long term, you go ahead and do that. But if it's a situation where you're still kind of unsure, and you have a Karan Amagaji who's maybe coming on, maybe he can come in and do, in the coaching staff's opinion, can do a similar job, or maybe a little bit worse, maybe a little bit better, who knows? But you gotta kind of let the season play out. There's no way you can kind of go into the season and say, all right, we're gonna sign him for sure, he's part of our core. Let's see how he plays out. Let's see how he recovers. But it's just obviously a huge year for Braxton Jones. So, but again, everyone's got a clean slate. I'm a fan of Braxton Jones, but I think like the last couple of years, obviously the injury doesn't help end of the year, but a lot of ups and downs. We always talked about him getting stronger, fortifying his core strength, and I just feel like that never got done, and that's been a little bit disappointing. But he's got the size, he's got the athletic ability to play left tackle, and if he becomes a half decent left tackle, I mean, you can win with a Braxton Jones, right? You can win with Braxton Jones. So I know that Charles Leno was brought up there, and the same thing. You and I were on these airwaves talking about Charles Leno. Like, yeah, is he all pro? No. Is he a great left tackle? No. But you know what? You can win with a Charles Leno, and that's the thing. Is like, we were talking about quarterbacks nowadays, and that fortifying the inside of that pocket, which the Bears are hopefully done now. Allowing even the pressure comes up from the outside, quarterback can step up in the pocket because he has a firm inside, and that way then he can go and continue making plays down the football field. So we'll see what happens, but it's a huge year for Braxton Jones.
Yeah, I think, Vince, and I apologize for rewriting your question, but I think a better question might have been, how much more improvement do we need to see out of Braxton Jones in order to consider re-signing him? So do you want Braxton Jones to play at a Pro Bowl level? If he's playing at a Pro Bowl level, sure, you have to negotiate and try to keep him, right? But is it possible that he can make the leap from where he is at now to a top 5, top 10 left tackle in this league? What do you think about that? Can he close that gap from being like the 15th to 20th left tackle in this league? Because he really is that good, because there's a lot of bad left tackles out there. Can he close that gap? Let's say he's 20. Can he get up to 10?
Well, I mean, I think it could. I mean, especially now, adding a Joe Thuney next to him, I think that's going to help him a lot. Especially, but the health is the main thing, right? If his ankle is good and he's 100% healthy, I think he's got the ability to be a top 15 tackle. But again, do you really need to go spend big money on a left tackle when you have a quarterback that can be able to step up in the pocket and get rid of the football? So that's the thing. That's Braxton Jones getting better, and also Caleb Williams learning to maneuver himself in the pocket now. That's one of the things with helping him and bringing these new offensive linemen and kind of fortifying his middle is now you give him confidence to buy time, not by flipping out and running away from the pocket, but staying in the pocket, just moving left or right, up and down, back and forth, to buy himself some more time and get that ball off down the football field. So again, fortifying the middle is huge, and you can get away with tackles that are not top 5, for example. The Kansas City Chiefs, they just went out and just signed Jalen Moore to a 2-year contract. Jalen Moore was a backup to Trent Williams with the 49ers because the Chiefs know that they fortified their middle of their offensive line with some of the money and draft capital that they put in there, and that's the most important thing. As long as you have solid to decent tackle play, I think you can win in this league with that.
Yeah, I agree with that. Before I play any more sound bites, I'd like for you to give us an assessment of the players that were acquired, in particular, the 3 interior linemen. Let's start with Drew Dahlman. What is your scouting report on Drew? He's been in the league, 5 years now?
4 years, yeah.
4 years. So how good of a player is he? What more ceiling does he have? What are the things he does best? What are the things that maybe we should be concerned about?
Yeah, for Dahlman, 4th-round pick out of Stanford. He's an athletic guy. His dad, Chris Dahlman, played for the 49ers, was also an offensive lineman, so he has that NFL pedigree. He's a guy came out of Stanford, very smart, very sharp, athletic, mover. He has gotten a little bit bigger over the years with the Falcons. But to me, when looking at Dahlman, for me at least, he wasn't an ideal fit for this scheme because I think what Ben Johnson's going to do is going to run a bunch of different stuff. He's going to run some inside zone, some outside zone. He's going to run some power. So I thought he was going to look for more of a bigger, more stout center at the point of attack. Dahlman's not that, but what Dahlman is he's more of that athletic guy. He's a guy, inside zone. He can chip and he can release that second level linebacker. That's going to be important for him, and I think that's where they use it. And then when you do run outside zone, he's a guy that can flip his hips in the gap and seal off that backside penetration. So he's a more of that athletic move tight end. Move center that can move laterally and maintain or keep contact with the defensive lineman. So he's one of those athletic type of guys, not more of those power at the point of attack kind of maulers, if you will. So
yeah, Good scouting report, and J2K just flashed up on the screen his thoughts. Dahlman is very athletic, enough size, not small like Shelton, good hands, good in space, reads defense as well. Let me share with you what Grady Jarrett, who, by the way, stole the press conferences today. His was the most inspiring. He just was a magnet.
His personality just shines.
Oh, my goodness. And he offered up this 30-second evaluation of Drew Dahlman, who he's, of course, played alongside of on the same team. So he knows what he's talking about here.
Drew is tough. Drew is smart, Stanford guy. He's big, strong, quick. I think something that makes Drew so difficult when you're a defensive lineman going against him, I think that his hat speed with the way he can reach nose tackles, even reach three techniques, be able to eject the three technique out when the guard make a base block, the power and knowing how to climb up. And I mean, working against him in Atlanta, he was so smart. You know, he had some great guys working with him as well. But to see his growth as a rookie to where he come now, I mean, dude's a beast, man. I'm happy that he's going to be here, and I think he's going to bring a lot to this team.
That's impressive stuff right there. Impressive stuff. Danny, talk to me a little bit about the three tech, because I'll be honest with you. You know, I never heard it mentioned as much as I'm hearing it now in the last few years with the Chicago Bears. Eberflus comes over to the Bears. They talk about the importance of the three tech. And now it seems like every team, you know, is talking about the three tech, either about the opposing team's three tech or, you know, their own three tech. What can you share with us about the three tech position and where it is at in the NFL today?
I'm surprised because Lovie Smith for introduced that to us back in his days, because obviously it all starts from days with the Tampa 2 with Tony Dungy and Rod Marinelli. Obviously Warren Sapp was one of the premier three technique defensive linemen of all time. You know, again, the three techs are quicker, twitchier defensive linemen. They typically line up on the outside shoulder of the guards, and that three slot, if you will, on a defensive line. And again, these are guys that are quicker. These guys that can shoot up into the gaps and create penetration and disruption to the backfield, whether it's as a run defender and it's particularly as a pass rusher as well. So, typically you hear that the term three tech in these 4-3 schemes, 4-3 fronts. So, there's different variations. Some defensive coordinators like their three techs to be, bigger, longer, like Eberflus did. Guys that can like a Gervon Dexter, guys that can get up and maybe bull rush the guard into the backfield, but also have at least enough wiggle and quickness to get back into the gap and get upfield as well. So, but he liked length. Even Burnson Buckner was his three tech when he was with the Colts as well. So a different kind of body type, but still a guy who's disruptive, lines up typically to the outside shoulder of the guard, and it gets upfield, gets into those gaps and creates penetration and creates problem for the offensive line and the quarterback into the backfield, basically. So typically, again, they're quicker, faster, more twitcher, defensive linemen.
Yeah. Okay. So the one thing about the three tech is regarding the Bears offensive line is who is going to face that three tech more often, the left guard or the right guard, or can you give me some clues on that?
Typically it lines up either side, right? Either guard could line up, but typically it's the right guard that faces the three tech, or if they flip over to the other side, it's usually the guard that has to deal with the three tech. But the centers could also have to deal with them as well, because in that clip right there, Jarrett talked about a reach block, and that would be Drew Dahlman being athletic enough to be able to reach that three technique that's lined up across from him, his guard teammate onto his outside shoulder. So he's have to reach him and get to it and do a reach block there. So that's what he meant by reaching and ejecting the three technique. That's what he was talking about there.
Great stuff. Okay. So now let's talk about your evaluations on the two guards. Let's start with Jonah Jackson. He was the first one that came in via trade. We know that he played well at a high level under Ben Johnson at Detroit. We know that things did not go well in LA. Have you studied any tape, and what can you share about Jonah Jackson?
Yeah, I mean, I studied Jonah Jackson just kind of like Ryan Pohl said. I studied Jonah Jackson back when he was with Rutgers, coming out of Rutgers, and he went to Ohio State for his last year, and he coming out there, and he was a guy that I liked a lot in terms of a big, powerful guy, in terms of point of attack. It wasn't a real scheme fit for what the Bears were running at the time, but yeah, he's more of a power guy. He's a guy that you can trap, pull, have him lead the back through the B gap or through the C gap. gap. But he's more of a power guy at the point of attack and a guy that can be physical. So, last year he went to the Rams. Obviously, he was a Pro Bowl alternate with the Lions under Ben Johnson and Dan Campbell. Went to the Rams last year. Obviously got hurt, and then they kicked him inside to center. Now again, McVay runs that wide zone scheme, right? We talk about guys that are like Dahlman, that are athletic, guys that can move east and west laterally and maintain contact with the defensive guy. For me, John Jackson's not a great fit for that type of scheme, right? Could you run it here and there? Sure, but to be a predominant wide zone scheme like Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan's and guys like that, I didn't see him as a great fit. But they put him at center, didn't work out for whatever reason. He got benched. Obviously, the injury didn't help out as well. And then they put in Bo Limmer, a rookie from Arkansas, who was a smaller guy, more athletic guy at center, and that's how they ended up finishing the season with. So I think it was a bad scheme fit. Not sure in terms of who the evaluation did, in terms of why they thought he would be a nice fit there. That's neither here or there. He's here now. I think he's going to be running more of these, power gap stuff, more inside zone stuff, some occasional wide zone stuff. But again, he's a guy that I think at the point of attack, he's going to be more of that guy that can move guys, displace defensive linemen and help reset the line of scrimmage.
Okay, now so give me your evaluation on Tooney, the guy that we picked up from the Chiefs.
Yeah, Tooney, again, 32 years old, still all pro guard. I mean, he's a guy that, obviously, he can do anything. You could talk about, wide zone. You could talk about gap. You could talk about, any inside zone. He's a guy that's done it all, seen it all. Very solid in terms of pass protection. Same with John Jackson. I forgot to add that, in terms of pass protection, they're very good. They can move their feet. They can mirror in condensed spaces. What Tooney did last year actually for the Chiefs was amazing. Where they were struggling at left tackle, they kicked him out to left tackle. Obviously he doesn't have the size or the length, and he held up his own in that offense and protecting Patrick Mahomes' blind side. Now again, they kind of scheme offensively. And you're reading them. They scheme the offense to kind of not let him be there, going long term versus guys like, for example, there was hardly any 7-step drops, when Tooney was playing left tackle. But again, he held his own and he helped them get to the Super Bowl. Now, obviously, Super Bowl was a different story. The whole offensive line got ambushed by what the Eagles were putting out there. So, and that's there. But for me, when the initial trade was done, I knew they got John Jackson. I knew he was a guard, left or right. I knew he had a center background at Rutgers, but I don't think he was a center, especially because of what happened last year with the Rams. But I thought Tooney might have been an option there at center, but obviously Dahlman is now in here at center, and then Tooney's just going to play his regular left guard position, and then you have John Jackson there at right guard. So yeah, he's more that KG veteran. He could run any kind of scheme you want. And he could good in pass protection, and we talked about earlier that brings that leadership, brings that experience that guys are going to look up to and follow in that offensive line room.
Yeah, great stuff, Danny. Now let's talk about Dayo Odeyingo. I think I got that, Odeyingo.
Yeah, I'm going to butchering his name all year. I apologize, Dayo. I think it's. I heard it and I try to memorize it. Now I'm drawing a blank as I'm trying to say it here, but. Odeyingo, I think. Odeyingo. Ingbo is how the last.
Odeyingo. Yeah.
Odeyingo. Okay.
Please evaluate Dayo for us.
Yeah, Dayo. He was one of the guys I mentioned. In terms of keep an eye on this guy because he fits the profile in which what Dennis Allen wants, and that's why when you hear these people talking, these so-called professionals talking about Khalil Mack and some of these other guys, Hassan Reddick, like these guys are not scheme fits. Look at what Dennis Allen likes. He wants guys who have length, who have quickness, who are physical at the point of attack, and that's what Dayo brings. He's 6'6", 265, 6'6", 275 with 35-inch arms. Again, developing player. He's a guy that came out in the second round. Was drafted in the second round. Out of Vanderbilt, towards Achilles, so that kind of slowed down his initial, introduction to the NFL. But he's a guy that's consistently gotten better, right? So, 2 years ago he had 8 sacks. I think last year he only had 3 sacks. But look kind of beyond that, right? And I think Grady Jarrett touched on it today too in his press conference. People might have 3 sacks, but look at his quarterback hits. He had 17 quarterback hits. And I think I saw somewhere it said 42 quarterback pressure. So he's making the quarterback uncomfortable in the pocket. He might not be getting a sack, but he's there. He's providing that pressure. he's making that quarterback rush his play clock, throw the ball earlier than he wants to, or throw without his, setting his feet, and that leads to incompletions or bad plays or turnovers. So I think he's a guy that can affect the passer in multiple different ways. The best thing about Dio, being honest with you guys, is watch him on third downs when they kick him inside. When they kick him inside and he rushes from that defensive tackle position, I think that's where he's more effective, to be honest with you. But I know he's a defensive end. He's going to start off in the base as a defensive end. But that's why I don't rule out another defensive end or edge guy, whether it's someone in the draft, maybe one of these veterans, goes on sign and they bring him in on a 1-year deal. But, if you bring in another edge rusher off the edge, you kick Dio inside on your third down packages. Now you're talking about, Jarrett, Dio, Montez Sweat, and then, name your other defensive end. It could be Austin Booker. I'm a huge, a fan of that kid. So, hopefully he takes the next step and he develops there as well. So, but just bringing guys with length and with speed and quickness after the quarterback. And I think that's what Dio brings right away. I think you're on mute. You are mute.
Sorry. And I love what J2K says here. Dio was the only gamble in free agency signing, the only gamble as a free agent signing. I like it because the rest of free agency was so good. There's so much potential. I do think he's more of a 3-tech, but will play defensive end if we don't draft a defensive end early. Your thoughts? Yeah,
he'll be the 3-tech if they get another defensive end or someone else like Austin Booker, like I said, steps up and he becomes that outside guy, and then you can kick Dio inside because he's more effective inside as a defense tackle when he's pass rushing, in my opinion. So, but yeah, in the base packages, he'll be your starting defensive end, and then you'll see for a lot of times you'll see him kick inside. Saw a lot last year too with DeMarcus Walker. A lot of times Walker started at the end, and then there are packages where you kick DeMarcus Walker inside, and he was effective rushing from the defensive tackle position. I think you see the same thing here with Dio.
All right. What about the tight end that we acquired from the Dolphins? Do you know much about Durham Smythe? Yeah, Durham
Smythe, another Notre Dame tight end. He's more of that blocker type. Not in terms of in pass protection. We talked about Ben Johnson. He's going to want probably 5 tight ends on his roster, I'm thinking, because he loves going 12, 13 personnel sometimes. So, those tight ends are going to be very important. So, you only have, I believe you only have 2 on the roster, Smythe and Cole Kmet. So, I expect them to draft one.
Guys, but I don't know anything at all about them. They're mysteries to me. I think
I know there was someone on a practice squad. I forgot his name right now, but I think, anyway, they're going to have tight ends in this training camp, and they're going to probably carry, like I said, 4, maybe 5. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, he's an inline blocking tight end. He's a guy that's going to be seen a lot of times, but maybe more of that Mercedes Lewis role where he's more of that blocking type. Catch a pass here and there, but the complement pass catcher that we've been talking about for Cole Kmet, that's probably going to come during the draft.
Okay, excellent. All right, let's get to the star of the show, Grady Jarrett. Let's talk a little bit about his first of all, I got to share this one because it's so funny. Our buddy over at the Bigs asked this question of Grady. He introduces himself here. So
Herb Howard.
Herb Howard. Yeah. Brain fart there. But check out this exchange here.
Herb Howard with the Bigs, man. You talked about trash talking with Coach. I saw a mic'd up clip with you. Y'all was playing the Packers, and you passionately told Jordan Love to pipe down.
Go ahead, finish it. What else I say?
I can't.
The 20, he'll roll to the 19. And Jordan Love chirping at Grady Jarrett.
Well, you better pipe down, little. Go. You better pipe down, little. I just got to get to him. When I get there, I'm gonna give him a little hug, put him down. I ain't gonna do nothing too crazy.
I'm glad you know what I'm talking about, though. Was that just a regular football interaction, or was that something just a little bit more?
Man, when you playing ball, man, doing this, being professional and being able to talk and communicate with people is something. But when you playing ball, you cross some lines, you got to be able to go in that dark place, And sometimes what happened in that dark place, it get a little crazy. You know what I'm saying? And just being a competitor. And like I talked about mic'd up with some of the new media team here, and I was like, yeah, I know I got some crazy ones. And that was released. So the stuff that's not released got to be super crazy. But you got to have that dog in you. You know what I'm saying? Obviously, Jordan Love is a good quarterback. But my thing is, So if you already can't hit the quarterback so many different ways. See, first of all, I chased him down the field over 50 yards. I went and caught him. So I got that speed on me too. And that was 2 years ago, so I'm only getting faster. So then to walk away from me talking mess, I mean, what we doing? We ain't, you know what I'm saying? But I'm excited to get to go against him 2 times a year now. And, just try to, help this organization get some wins over that other team.
That could very well be the moment of the preseason during this stage of the season, at least. That quote there was fantastic.
Well, I mean, between Ben Johnson, his little opening statement with Matt LaFleur, and now with Grady Jarrett, the Bears are talking some smack here. So hopefully they can back it up in the season.
Yeah, and sometimes I'm against that, but the way it's been displayed so far, I'm fine with it.
It's a little playful, tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah,
stuff.
Exactly. It's not.
I think Jarrett's got some little meaning in his.
Yes, I think so too. He said, you go into this place of darkness while you're out there playing. So yeah, that's unbelievable. I want to play one more for you from Grady Jarrett. This is talking about how fired up he is to join the Bears.
Being in one place for 10 years is definitely something special. Atlanta was my hometown, is my hometown, with or without the Falcons. Atlanta will always have a special place in my heart, and I'll have a special place in the people there that supported me. But in this new chapter of my life, I'm so happy to be here in a great city like Chicago, an organization who has a history of just being, just dominant defense, legendary players, Hall of Famers. I'm watching from afar, be able to walk in the building that's associated with Walter Payton. I've been a 2-time Walter Payton Man of the Year award nominee. I've met his family a couple of times. So the pride that I have in this place, I didn't even know it really lived into me until I walked into the building. You know what I'm saying? And so I'm just so fired up. Sorry, y'all.
Great moment. Go ahead.
The one thing I'll predict right now, what is it? Let's say March 12th, that both Grady Jarrett and Joe Thuney will have captain season on their jerseys this season.
That would be really cool. And if any of the previous players who were on the roster before, the DJ Moores and Cole Kmets, are upset about that, they really need to check themselves. Those 2 players that I just named are star players who were captains last year and just did not understand what it is to be a good captain. And Ryan Post talked about that at the end of the year. Sometimes you have to teach captains how to captain. And that is true. When I worked in corporate America, you got to teach managers how to manage when you're in the position. And you just can't promote them and then throw them out there. You got to teach them how to manage the people that they're managing. And that's important. And we're seeing that, I think, with the Chicago Bears.
I believe leadership is something that comes, it's innate. It comes out naturally. You can't learn leadership. You can't go to a classroom and take a leadership class and become a great leader. I think, especially in football, obviously, football is like a thing where, the leadership, like you can tell right now, Grady Jarrett's going to run that defensive line room. He's going to be that guy. And I think these guys are going to follow him. Obviously the multi-time Pro Bowl and all the stuff he's done over the his career. Talked about Joe Thuney earlier in terms of the Super Bowls and all pros. I think those are guys that examples now that this team didn't have those type of people, right? In their locker rooms. They didn't have someone you could look up to and be like, all right, that guy knows how to do it. That guy does it the right way. That's who I'm going to follow. If it was a bunch of young guys and a bunch of haphazard put together roster, I think finally now you got the makings of something where you got guys on both sides here, and maybe more guys will develop. I think Jalen Johnson was kind of developing it, but I think last year kind of just really took him into a dark place in terms of, because I think his frustrations just boiled over, and I think he did things that weren't really considered, quality leadership type stuff. So, now we have a guy like Grady Jarrett, Joe Thuney, guys like that. And then hopefully more guys will develop, just kind of seeing those guys and learning from those guys.
See, I do disagree with you a little bit. And with Vince, I do think that you can develop a leader. I think that, let's take, for example, DJ Moore. I would have sat him down and said, DJ, you have to be really, really careful with your body language. There are times when you're frustrated where your body language is sending out a message to your teammates that you don't care, or that you're super frustrated with a rookie quarterback, or whatever it is, it's not positive. And so I really want you to focus on that. And DJ Moore is a smart guy, and he's appreciative of the big contract the Bears have gotten. I think he would have done that. I think that what happened with him and the Chicago Bears, there was nobody on the coaching staff that he respected,
Well,
so
that was maybe my question for you. It was going to be like, who would have sat down and told him that?
Yeah.
The coach who took no accountability, the coach who was lost himself. Like, that's the thing, is like, who would have done that last year?
I agree. Jason with a nice $5 donation. Thank you very much, Jason. And he writes, I think he has a chip on his shoulder against love and his mouth. He's talking about Grady Jarrett. Indeed. Yeah. He'll have extra juice against Green Bay. Yeah, and you want that so badly. This could be, maybe the most important free agency hire by the Chicago Bears, to bring in a guy who can play and back it up and has a grudge or a chip on his shoulder against the team that has been the longest nemesis for the Chicago Bears over the last 20 years. Their record is phenomenal against us. This could be really, really huge. Thank you, Jason, very much. All right, so let us get now to the premise of the rest of the show in this second half as we hit halftime. I'm going to play a soundbite from the press conference today that's going to kind of tee up what we're going to be talking about, which is preparing for the draft. Here it comes. Let me see if I got the right one here. Here it is. It's only 18 seconds long.
Yeah, this really opens the whole board for us. So we're going to be able to sit back and kind of look and say what's the best thing to do for the Chicago Bears and who's the best player that can impact. So we got some tough decisions and a lot of film to watch between now and the draft.
Okay, Danny, you are not Ryan Poles. I'm certainly not Ben Johnson. But let's talk from our fan perspective, and particularly your opinion, because you study the tape and you know the game much more than I do. I want to know from you is, with the acquisitions, the trade acquisitions and the free agent signings, how could this possibly impact the Bears' plans for the draft? They're going to sit around and talk about this. What do you think they're talking about in terms of what players, who they should look at, and so forth?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the same thing that Paul said, it opens up multiple, opportunities. Earlier in the show, I tweeted out, with some of these moves that maybe a Tyler Warren, a tight end, could be a possibility number 10. Not that I'm advocating for it, but it just, things can open up for you. Now, instead, you don't have a glaring need for an interior offensive lineman or possibly even a tackle, because the tackles in this draft are it's your pick of the flavor, right? You might like pistachio ice cream, or I might like vanilla. It's whoever, I'll see, for example, Amon Membu. Like, I see him possibly as a guard, maybe tackle. Half the league says no, he's a right tackle, right? But he's a right side player. So I'm just saying, like, you can read these players and say, all right, should we take this guy and plug in a hole here? You don't have that hole on your offensive line. You have 5 guys, if theoretically, if they all stay healthy, that you don't need to go and reach for a player. And that's the thing. Now you let the kind of the board fall to you, right? Now, if they stay at 10, I still believe that a defensive lineman is probably going to be the best player for them to take at number 10, not only because of, they still have a need or two there, but also I think the board's going to fall to them where the best player on the board will be a defensive lineman. So, but now if a trade opportunity comes up and they say, all right, team X says, all right, I'm giving you this, I need the number 10 pick. Now you say, all right, well, we got, a couple defensive linemen we could take here, or we can move down, and we have a couple other needs we can fulfill later on in the draft, so on and so forth. So that all the opportunities now are open for you, because there isn't a glaring need with neon lights sticking out, flashing in your face. So you got to fill it here, So I think that's what it kind of presents here for them, because you're able to fill, and that's the thing you hope with the draft. With free agency, is fill those needs, and that way you don't have to go into the draft saying, I need to draft X player, or I need to draft this position, or I need to draft that, because that's where you make mistakes.
J2K has an excellent point. It's one that he's presented before when he's been advocating for Josh Simmons, although he's warmed a little bit to the Josh Simmons to Bears thing, but he does state it this way. Wrong one. There it is. He says that the left tackle, that's a clear hole. And next year, we won't have a chance to draft a great left tackle ever again. He makes a good point, because hopefully we'll be drafting 25, 26, 32. And so this this might be the best chance to get a great left tackle. The problem is there a great left tackle in this draft, right?
Potentially. Simmons is potentially a great left tackle. I think if he was healthy, obviously, for those who don't know the backstory, Torres patella tendon in week 6, and it was out for the rest of the year. He's a guy that's played both right tackle and left tackle, looks the part. This is the guy that's got the length, the athletic ability. He's a left tackle from Ohio State. But eventually, unfortunately, he had the patella tendon tear. And the good news from what the media reports should say were that he was recovering ahead of schedule and that he was going to be good. But obviously, those are media reports. We need to see what the actual medical reports, and we won't have access to them, but the teams will. So we'll see how that goes. But the one thing with Josh Simmons, and initially when J2K brought up Josh Simmons, I'm like, yeah, listen, he's a guy that's talented as hell. If he was healthy, he probably could have been a top 10 pick, probably might have been the first offensive lineman taken. But because of that risk, that injury, Ryan Poles can't take a chance on a guy that might miss the entire season. But if you get good medical reports now you have an opportunity to say, all right, this is our left tackle of the future. We can go ahead and put him on ice for maybe a year or half a year, a full year, whatever. And now he can be a plug and play player next year. So that is an option there as well. I think 10 it might be a little bit too high, not because of his talent, just because of the questions surrounding his knee, the recovery time. You haven't seen the player play, and obviously it all is gonna fall on his medicals. What do the medicals say? What does your doctor say? If your doctor say, no doubt about it, he's going to be good to go 6 months from now, then that's information that they have that we won't have. But in terms of talent alone, this kid is a left tackle or right tackle. He can play either side, and he's, like I said, if he wasn't injured, he would have been a top 10 pick and would have been the first offensive lineman drafted in this draft.
Now, I haven't seen the tape from his first 2 years in college football, but I was listening to First Draft, Field Yates and Mel Kiper talking about Josh Simmons, and they're high on him, but they brought up something that I didn't know. At San Diego State in his first year at Ohio State, Josh had a lot of penalties and was really struggling with his game, and it wasn't until last season that he displayed elite play level at the left tackle position. Now, the last season was only 6 games because of the injury that we've discussed. So I'm a little bit nervous, that he potentially, is a one-year wonder. I don't think so, but there is that potential, which is why I'm a little leery at 10.
If you put on his 2023 tape at his first year at Ohio State, he's a little bit heavier. He's a little bit bulkier. Okay. You put on his last year's tape, he's a more leaner, more fit player. So, and you can just tell by the way he looks in his uniform. So I think obviously coming from San Diego State, where he was a right tackle, came to Ohio State in 2023. That was his first year, popped him left tackle. He was, again, he wasn't as athletic in terms of his movement skill than what I saw on his last year's tape. And again, only 6 game sample size, but those 6 games, he looked like an elite prospect at left tackle. So that's all you can go for with right now. And again, it is a gamble, especially at number 10 overall. Now, if you trade down and he drops to you in the teens or even in the upper 20s, that to me at that point, it's a gamble worth taking for me at that point, because you are potentially getting your franchise left tackle. You may have to wait for him, but again, it all depends on what they get back from the medical, from the doctor. So at 10, it might be a little bit of a too risky proposition because of in terms of injury and all that stuff. But if you trade down, get some extra picks, that could be a guy you can look at. And again, that's a possibility now opened up, right? Because if you're saying, hey, if we're going to stay here, if Will Campbell drops to us, we like him at guard, we'll plug him in at left guard, we'll go from there. But now you have left guard taken care of by an all-pro. So I think you don't need to take Will Campbell on number 10 if he's there for your number 10. Now the option of a trade, if it comes up to you, you have an option of dropping down, because guess what? You can get another player, another position, and move on from there as well. So we'll see how it goes. But that's the fact that you filled your primary need going in, which was an interior offensive lineman and a couple of defensive linemen. Now you need more, but the fact that those guys are set there, it gives you an opportunity to kind of mess around and play with the board here.
Outstanding. Oh, Loco says, I think Danny is a top prospect evaluator. I agree with you.
Thank you.
and make sure you subscribe to his channel. He's got his own YouTube channel now. It's called Shimon Draft Scout, and that's all one word, ShimonDraft Scout. And then follow him on the X Machine. He is
at. And for those who haven't seen Josh Shimon, go on Shimon Draft Scout. I have my video scouting report on him. You can take a look and see. I have clips of him, and I have my full detailed breakdown of Josh Simmons. I am high on the kid. The player himself is. I'm very high on him. It's the medical question mark that I'm kind of. I don't have that data. I don't have access to the doctors that the Bears have, so I don't know. So that's the one thing that's in my mind giving me a little bit pause on the kid.
Well, and I believe that if the medicals are sterling in a positive way, that he will be drafted in that 10 area. If the medicals from the combine and at his pro day come back and the doctor say, don't worry about this guy, he'll be fine, he's going to have a long career, then he's going to get drafted where he probably would have been drafted before the injury. Rami asked the question, will this injury be an injury that can happen again easily? Again, tough to tell because we don't have the medicals, but ACL repairs. I know that J2K posted about this in the chat not too long ago, that there's been so many great advances with ACL injuries. And so,
but it's not ACL. That's what I initially thought was ACL, but it's actually a patella tendon.
That's right.
It's a thicker, more more sturdier tendon, I guess. And the recovery or the recovery isn't as long as an ACL. It doesn't usually take a year to come back, but it's a more strenuous recovery, to get back from a patella tendon. So that's the one difference. And again, the fact that I don't have that, I don't have the access to the medicals, I can't really give you an honest assessment about it. But just going off of his tape, and the measurements and the measurables and the way he moves, the way he blocks, and the way he plays, this guy, I if he was healthy, I'm telling you, he's going to be he would have been the first offensive lineman selected in this draft.
Great stuff. All right, I'm collecting a bunch of questions here. I've got quite a few, but first let's dovetail to the little game that we're going to play. It's called Do or Don't.
It's now time for Danny's Do or Don't.
You see what happens when I got a few minutes on my hand? I do silly.
I give you a couple of pictures a couple years ago, and next thing you know, they're popping up through 2 years, 3 years later.
That's right. They're all over the internet now. You cannot escape the fact that those pictures of you with sleeveless shirts are all over the internet now. All right, so here's the way what we're going to play this is I'm going to ask Danny a question, and it's basically, would you do this or would you don't, or would you advise that the Bears don't do this? So the first question is pretty easy. If the Bears traded down to number 15, do you consider selecting Ashton Jeanty with that pick? So I think a lot of people are really advocating for Jeanty, but at 10, that's where the arguments start to ensue. But if he does come to 15 and you're acquiring either a third second rounder or a high third rounder, would you consider then selecting Jeanty with that pick?
Well, a little bit unfair because I don't know who else is on the board, right? Is there another player that I like, maybe at a better, more in terms of another position of need or whatnot? So that's the question. But just going off this premise, I'll say no. And the reason was because I'm going to stick to my guns. I do not draft running backs in the first round. I simply don't. If you want to trade back into the bottom of the first round, pick 31 or 32 and take a running back because you think it's not going to be there at the top of the second round, I'm okay with that. But at this point, I love Ashton Jeanty, but I love this running back class. I mean, there are I can give you 8, 9 guys that I like in this class, right? Guys that are round 1, round 2, round 3, guys in the 4th, 5th round that you can draft in this class. So I'd say no, I'd pass on him.
All right, I would too. I have to admit that the Jeanty is such an intriguing back, and I'd hate to bypass a guy who could potentially be a Hall of Famer. But I do think that the drop-off between Jeanty and guys like Omarion Hampton isn't that huge. I am a big fan of Hampton. How would you rank your top 3 running backs in this draft?
Yeah, right now, the way I have them currently, it's Jeanty and then next will be Omarion Hampton. I personally, I love Judkins from Ohio State, but I haven't kind of finalized his grade. But it's Judkins, Caleb Johnson from Iowa, Travion Henderson is in there as well. There's other guys I'm missing. Dylan Sampson from Tennessee. There's a ton of guys in that area that I can pick. There's a guy I love, possibly late day 2, early day 3. DJ Giddens. I think I talk about him every single damn show we're on. The kid from Kansas State. I love that kid as well. There's so many backs in this draft. One of the deepest class I've ever seen. So for me, I would pass on that at 15. And if a kid like Judkins or Travion Henderson or even that Johnson's available on top of that, or Omarion Hampton's available on top of that second round, that's where I pounce.
Yeah. I like that approach. Absolutely. All right, let's get to our second one. And this one is do or don't. If the Bears select Armand Membu at number 10, and we know, as you said earlier in the show, his best side is the right side, but there is a debate whether it should be at right tackle or right guard. But if the Bears select Membu at number 10, do you then entertain trade offers for Darnell Wright? What do you say?
So this is where I have to. They're picking Membo, right? I can't say I wouldn't pick Membo number 10. You're saying they picked Membo number 10. What do you do with Darnell Wright?
Right.
That's the question.
That's basically it. Or basically what I want to know is, and trying to think out of the box, which I think all organization leaders should do. They should have a discussion. Hey, if Membo's there, we're going to take him at right tackle. But now, where are we going to play him? And then somebody says, well, would you consider trading Darnell Wright? Because I heard, a team that wants a veteran right tackle. So you got to have that discussion. So what I'm asking you is, are you willing, do you or don't you have entertained thoughts about trading Darnell Wright if you acquire Membo or another right tackle candidate?
I do not. I keep him because even if for me, at least in my evaluation of Membo, I believe he's a guy that's a starter on the right side. But even if you draft him number 10, you can also bring him in and you can make him initially, a backup to, Darnell Wright or have him compete with Darnell Wright. And the best player will go ahead and start there. But at worst case scenario, Darnell Wright starts for you. You have a backup who can back up for right guard and right tackle for you there as well. So I think that's what I would do. You cannot have enough offensive linemen and enough defensive linemen, in my opinion. That is the heart of a team. And one injury can knock, one of these players off for the entire year, God forbid. And next thing you know, you have a huge gaping hole. So you always need to fortify, the offense and defensive lines. That's one of the things that I love, the way Howie Roseman, the Eagles GM, builds his teams. They lost 2 or 3 starters already on their defensive front 7, but they got guys that are going to just plug and play here and go on next season. So that's why they're not going to skip a beat. So that's why it's like you draft Membo, you have Darnell Wright. If you have questions about Darnell Wright, you let the coaching staff, have him for a year and see what they say. If they say, hey, you know what, we're good. We like Darnell Wright. He's always, I've always felt like Darnell Wright could kick inside the guard and be an all-pro guard. But if you keep him up tackle, that's fine. I think you can plug Membo in at right guard. I know you just got Jonah Jackson. But again, these are different options here. You can do a bunch of different things, but I would not trade Darnell Wright in this scenario here.
Okay, excellent. So would you then entertain the idea? Do you think it's feasible that Wright could move to left tackle and Membu at right?
I know he played it at Tennessee for a season. I don't like him at left tackle, but I don't hate it, the idea. So, for example, if Braxton Jones flops and you feel like that, he's gone after this year, we talked about earlier, this is the last year of his contract, and you want to flip Darnell Wright, I'd give it a shot. I wouldn't be like, oh, no, you can't do that. No, it could, because he's got the athletic ability, but I like him more on the right side. But it's not something that I would just poo right away. I would give it some thought and some consideration. But yeah, no, initially I would not get rid of any one of these guys.
All right, very good. We're going to move on to our next one, and it's do or don't. The Bears haven't selected a defensive player in the first round since 2018, Danny, and that was, of course, Roquan Smith. Do you go defense at number 10 under this scenario? So I think I got a graphic here that will help us because you brought up the issue of so let me do this so that we're not covered up there. There you go. All right, so the draft, let's pretend we saw Carter go first, Travis Hunter go second, Cameron Ward, the quarterback, to the Giants at third, Will Campbell to the Jets. They'd make a dumb move like that and insert Campbell at the tackle position. Armand Memble 5 to the Jaguars, Ashton Jeanty 6, Mason Graham 7th to the Patriots, McMillan, the wide receiver, to the Panthers at 8, and Shadur Sanders at 9. So now you're on the clock. Pull out your notes there, and you have to then make a decision as to who you're going to go 10. And you're going to have somebody in the room saying, Danny, we haven't picked a defensive player, and we need an edge guy so badly. They're so expensive in free agency. What are we going to do, Danny?
I'm going back to the same school that we picked that guy from in 2018. I'm going back to Georgia. I'm getting Michael Williams. I love that kid. If this scenario plays out the way you just have laid out here, Aldo, I would not even hesitate. I might pull a hamstring, try and get that card in quick enough to get Michael Williams on this team. Like we talked about earlier, Dio is a guy that's good. That's going to start off in your base defense as your defensive end, but he's better in terms of rushing, kicking inside. You got a kid like Michael Williams, young, developing. I know the numbers, the stats aren't eye-popping, but this is a guy. Today was his pro day. This guy measuring at 6'5", 260, 34 and 3/8 inch arm length. So he's got the measurements and the size that Dennis Allen likes. Today he ran a 4. I saw some reports. He ran a 4.73. I saw some 4.68 in terms of his pro day to 40. But what I saw was a 1.59 10-yard split. That is very, very impressive for a guy 260 at 6'5". So he's a guy that, for me, still developing. He's still a guy that's not a finished product yet. But man, you bring him in, and now again, there's no pressure for him to start week 1. You have Dio there. You have obviously the rest of the guys on the defensive line, and just let him grow and get better and better. That's what I would do here in this scenario.
Well, our guy, Addie Lauren, 13, agrees with you. Michael Williams is also the pick that he was looking at. Jay Grizz says that Williams gives him Leonard Floyd vibes.
Player, Jay Grizz, different player. Leonard Floyd was more of an athletic guy. He was an off-the-ball linebacker that Ryan Pace and company thought they could move into as a 3-4 outside linebacker. He wasn't really asked to rush the passer. Every once in a while, he'd come after the quarterback. But, this kid – Michael Williams is a guy that's again a tailor-made 4-3 in the ground defensive end, hand in the ground defensive end, can also stand up and line up and rush from a 2-point stance, gives you so much versatility. And again, just getting better, guys, just developing. He's got the length, he's got the size, he's got the first step quickness. This kid is got star potential written all over him.
Yeah. One of the thrills of my career, this last part of my career, doing this with the Bears, was going to training camp with Danny a couple of times. And one time he pointed something out to me that I've never forgotten. There's several things that he's done that with, but this one was, I think it was Dominic Robinson. He told me, take a look at Dominic Robinson. You see his body, how it's gotten bigger? He spent the offseason acquiring or building an NFL body. So I say that because Cliff Victoria is asking this question. What about Booker, the defensive end who was a 5th-round draft pick a year ago? I anticipate he's going to show up with an NFL body. What are your thoughts on Booker's potential?
Yeah, I'm a huge Booker fan. I was a huge fan last year. I think obviously, he was a redshirt sophomore coming out of Kansas. So this is the guy that basically didn't play in Minnesota, transferred to Kansas, had 1 season in Kansas, came into the draft, went to the Senior Bowl, and really impressed the scouts and everybody else. And again, he was a guy that wasn't ready for prime time last year. I think we saw that. But he's got the traits, he's got the first step quickness, he's got the length, he's got the athletic ability, and he's a guy that doesn't back down in terms of setting a hard edge and being a good, solid run defender. So, right, he needs to add some weight and also continue to work on his pass rush repertoire. But he's a guy that I have not given up on as well. He's one of the guys I am looking forward to seeing how he's being utilized in this defense. So, yeah, I mean, even if you're bringing a Michael Williams, Austin Booker can still play. He can still be a part of your rotation. Because remember, one thing about Dennis Allen, guys, and we'll, as we see him kind of coach and we'll see this come in the forefront here, he likes defensive pass rushers in waves. So think of it like a hockey shift, right? There's that first shift comes in, and the second guys, they go out, and the second shift comes in. That's how Dennis Allen, like, he wants guys that are interchangeable, guys that can be in and fresh and throughout the football game. So the more guys you have, defensive linemen, whether it's inside or outside, he wants them because he can bring these guys at waves towards the quarterback. So that way the defensive guys are not huffing and puffing at the end of the game. Instead, it's the offensive linemen that have been battling for most of the game, and they're tired now towards the end of the football game. So they're going to just keep bringing these guys after them in waves after the quarterback.
Yeah, it's shaping up to be a team with a depth in the trenches, which is a philosophy that is vital, I think, to success in today's NFL. I learned it from Jim Finks back when he was general manager of the Chicago Bears in the late 70s and earlies. That's how you build a winning team.
Some things don't change. Some things don't change. People try to get cute. General managers and head coaches try and get cute with it. Just stick to the meats and potatoes. If your offense and defensive lines, I've said this multiple times, guys. You guys all heard this before. If offense and defensive lines suck, your team sucks. If your offense and defensive lines are good, your team's going to be good.
Yep. All right, I've collected a bunch of questions, and I promise you we will get to them. Steven just asked the question that I hit the star to. We'll get to all your questions momentarily. I've got 2 more do or don'ts for Danny. This one is, I think it's going to be of big interest to a lot of people in the chat because I keep seeing the name Xavier Watts come up. So the question is, do or don't, Danny, if the Bears trade down to acquire a 3rd, 2nd round pick, do you consider drafting Xavier Watts? And the reason I phrased it this way, because if you know anything about Danny Shimon, he is not going to draft a guy in the first 2 rounds who plays the safety position. But I also know that he is a big fan of Xavier Watts. And I also know that he knows that we have 4 safeties right now who are playing out the final years of their contract. So what other information do you want in order to make this decision?
Well, so to go back on the safety thing, I think the big thing came up when they picked Jaquan Brisker in the 2nd round, and my case in point there was, and I made that statement at the time. It's not the player, it's the position, and at the time in which they drafted, I felt like it was a rebuild, and I don't believe, like I just said, I don't believe you rebuild from the outside in. But obviously, we've had that story so many times, polls with this board, blah, blah. So that was the big thing. Now, if you're telling me you're getting a 3rd, 2nd round pick, and so I'm assuming you've traded down in the 1st round, you've gotten an offensive lineman or defensive lineman, whatever it is, you've come after the 2nd round, you've used it. I got a running back, you might have got a receiver, maybe a tight end. At this point, I think safety is a position, so I would do it, and then because safety is a position. It's a quiet major need position, and it all kind of revolves around the health of Jaquan Brisker. And all the reports are positive. I know everything says he's good to go, but until I see him playing football and until I see him take a hit and get up without any effects, it's hard for me to be like, all right, because these type of head injuries, we can't predict. There's no CAT scan, there's no X-ray. We say, oh, he's good to go. It's all different, right? Different players react differently to head injuries, right? Some, like Jaquan Brisker, takes a long time to recover. Some might never recover, unfortunately, right? And some just bounce back in a week or 2 and they're good to go, and they're fine. So that's what it's so hard. And then leaving that aside, Kevin Byard, who I think had a pretty good year last year, he's an older veteran in the last year of his contract. Yeah. So again, you're going to have to bring in, some youth here. I know. I think some of the backups last year had a decent, and it's Elijah Hicks. I think had a decent, fill-in role. But again, he also got himself injured towards the end of the year as well. So safety is a quiet need position, and Xavier Watts is one of the top guys in here. For me, 6 feet, 200 pounds is a ball hawking free safety, a guy that can go up and make get the ball and rip the ball away from the offense. So I would highly consider it's him and Malachi Starks, the kid from Georgia, that really for me are the top 2 safeties in this draft class. So yeah, and if you want to wait maybe later on, there's a couple other guys later on, and safety is, like I said, a quiet need position that doesn't really get the bells and whistles. But I think this is going to be something that's probably going to be addressed maybe later on in free agency with a veteran, or if not, then I think for sure later on in the draft. But not typically, I wouldn't assume it'd go day 1 or day 2. But in this scenario that you play here, Aldo, with a third, second round pick, I think I would go, especially if the player like Xavier Watts is available.
Okay, that's great. And you make a great point, too, is that there are some intriguing safety prospects later in the draft. I mean, you're looking at the Brisker's, the guy who took over for Brisker, I'm pretty sure.
Kevin Winston Jr.
Yeah.
Kevin Winston Jr. Yeah. There's Andrew Mukaba from Texas, who's 5'11", but he packs a wallop in terms of as a downhill hitter. He's a guy who was a Clemson transfer, play last year at Texas. I think he's a guy that's got some potential. Again, more of a day 3 guy than Xavier Watts. But again, Malachi Starks is a guy for me. Billy Bowman Jr. really had a great combine, but he's more of like that hybrid kind of nickel safety. So there are options. There are going to be options for you here as well. So obviously the big kid from South Carolina is going to probably be a guy that's going to go higher up than Xavier Watts. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I mean, there's some options, but it's again, you just break it down by position and what they have. It's a quiet, need position for the Bears. And again, it all revolves around Jaquan Brisker. If Brisker's back, I think you're good. I think we can omit that position from this draft class, and you can move on maybe in future years. But that health is something like that. There's no X-ray, there's no CAT scan that can tell us, hey, he's good to go. It's all something we have to see him play and take that hit and get up and hopefully doesn't have those kind of recurring concussion issues.
Everyone is slotting Nick Emmanwori as a first-round draft pick. He's a favorite. I mean, he wowed people at the combine with his metrics, his numbers, his 40 speed and so forth, his vertical. But what do you know about him from his football career? Is he good?
That's the thing. He's a guy that tested out of the gym and put up some great numbers, but you put on his tape and yeah, he makes plays here and there, but he's not the player, for me at least, that Xavier Watts is or Malachi Starks is, right? Even Starks is more of that leader, that quiet leader, the heady guy back there for Georgia. Sets everybody back up in that backfield. Emmanwori is more of a bigger bodied freak athlete. But for me at least, I watched a couple of tapes of him. Obviously, watching some of the South Carolina defensive linemen as well, I see him there as well. For me, the play doesn't translate. The traits don't really translate for me on his tape. So I know a lot of people are higher on him than I am, but it's just the way when I look at him and I compare him to like a Watts or Malachi Starks, I just see a better player in terms of at the safety position than Emmanwori. But great athlete, jumped out of the gym, and there's a ton of people that like him a lot more than I do.
Okay, interesting. All right, this is our last do or don't, and then the last 30 minutes of the show we'll dedicate to answering questions. Danny will dedicate to answering questions. I'll just monitor here. So it's do or don't. With the Bears' current situation at linebacker, do you target someone like Carson Schlesinger in round 2? And the reason I ask this, Danny, is because when you look at this defense and the weak spots, obviously the edge position is a position that we could add some more depth and maybe even a starter or potential starter down the line. But with Tremaine Edmonds playing the way that he is, and with our outside linebacker TJ Edwards, getting up in age and his contract is up after this year, what about the linebacker position? Are we overlooking it? And could a guy like Carson make us feel really, really better about that linebacker position in 2025 and beyond? Your thoughts?
I don't do this because I don't take Carson Schlesinger in the second round. Now, if he's available in the 4th or 5th round, that's where I could pounce. For me, Schlesinger is a one-year player, one-year starter, only started 10 games prior to this year. First of all, he's a walk-on at UCLA. Prior to this past season, he was a reserve, a special teams guy, and got onto the football field, led the nation in tackles. I believe it was 138 tackles this past year. So he played well this year, but you put on his tape, he's a guy that to me is athletic, right? 39-inch vertical, good size, 6'2.5", 242. But excuse me, the instincts for me are still developing. They're not there yet. And I see him. He's the guy that he can scrape around the pile and fill the hole and wrap up the ankles and be a secure tackle. But he's a guy that can't really take on impact at the point of attack. He got, if there's a pulling guard coming around, he gets washed out, gets pulled out of the way. So, a lot of his tackles for me, from what I saw him against Oregon and against Iowa, it was more, he was kind of like dancing around blockers and making the tackle 5 or 6 yards down the football field, which is what we see with Tremaine Edmonds a lot, right? So for me, he's a guy that's a project player, developmental kind of player. He's got some good traits, some good athletic ability, but I'm more of a guy that I'd bring in, have him play special teams for the first couple of years until he builds up and becomes up. He has no strength in terms of play strength, in terms of being able to take on blockers or anything like that. So at this point, I think he'd be useless if you start him as a rookie. And I think a second round pick on a kid like that is too high of a pick. For me, I have him a day 3 guy. Maybe he goes earlier than that, but I just don't see the instincts and I see a hell of a competitor in terms of a guy that can go sideline to sideline. See good, again, I see some of that speed to be able to close in on players, but just doesn't have that take on power. And he can draw back in coverage. I think he's a guy that can cover maybe backs out of the tight ends out and down the seam. I can see him jumping into the flats, covering running backs and all that stuff. But just for me, he's not the overall linebacker that I would, especially in a second round pick.
J2K posts that Danny Stutzman from Oklahoma is his favorite middle linebacker. I know he asked Greg Gabriel about Stutzman in our last show, but Greg hasn't done any work on him. Have you done any work on Stutzman?
Not yet. No, I haven't got to linebackers yet, but I've done Basa from Oregon, who's a guy I like a lot, but he's more of a day 3 guy. So, there are some guys in day 3 that they can maybe, plug and find that. Again, for me, Schlesinger, I heard his name throughout the season. I haven't done a lot of work until now, and then I just put on his tape, and yeah, I see the athletic ability. Obviously, again, 39.5 inch vertical at the combine. He didn't do the full on the field workout. So, but for me, it's just a 1 year starter, only 10 starts in his career. I for whatever reason, to me, it's not a player that I'm high on as a second rounder. He's a guy that, like a developmental player, bring him in, sure, have a year or two, play special teams, and then eventually become a starter. I could see that, no doubt, but not second round.
All right. We promised you that we'd get the last 30 minutes of the show. We'd get to your questions, and we're going to start with a question that was offered about an hour ago from Dr. Truth, and it is a question for you guys. What do you think the balance will be between Dexter, Billings, and Jarrett at 2 of the defensive tackle positions? Danny, these are questions that are answered on the practice field, all right, and with matchups. Those are the key things. Plus, I think there will be a 4th person involved in the rotation.
They already have 5 guys right now I can think of. So we got Dexter, we got Billings, we got Jarrett, we got Zach Pickens, a 3rd round pick from a couple years ago. And then they tendered Chris Williams, a restricted free agent contract. So I think currently his status is a restricted free agent. So he may not be back. Who knows? But I know they like him. So I think there's 5 guys there. To me, and this is why I see it. And maybe you guys agree or disagree, but I see Jarrett as a guy that's going to start. I think Billings and Jarrett are the starters. I think they work in Dexter and Pickens, if he's here or whatnot. And then and I don't omit the position from the draft as well. So, for example, if in your scenario earlier where you trade down at 15th, if a kid like Kenneth Grant from Michigan is available, I'd pounce on him, right away. So, you still could go ahead and get another defensive tackle and bring him in there. So I think what they want to do is I think they want to limit Jarrett's snaps. He's 32 years old, 2 years ago coming off an ACL. Obviously, his stats have dropped over the years, but his ability to create pressure and be a presence is still there. So I think what they do is they want to keep him fresh. So I think they try to limit Jarrett's reps and again keep him fresh throughout the game. I talked about Allen likes to bring these guys in waves. So I think there's plenty of snaps for all 4 guys, possibly even 5 guys. So I won't worry about that. But I think in terms of starters, I think Billings and Garrett are the starters. And then they work the other guys in here as the game goes on.
You brought up the name Zach Pickens. What do we do with him? Is he a player that is suited for Dennis Allen? And can Dennis Allen do anything to help this player and salvage that 3rd round draft pick?
Yeah, he fits the profile. I mean, Pickens is 6'4", 298 with 34 and 3/8 arms lengths. Had a 1.62 10-yard split when he came out of South Carolina. I think he's a guy that fits in that three technique slot there as well. So, this is his chance with a clean slate. Obviously, last year was very disappointing, especially towards the end of the season where he was a healthy inactive, which is not a good thing, right? So, but the whole thing with last year, you kind of have to take that and just kind of crumble it up and throw it out and just give everyone a clean slate and see what happens here. So I think this is his opportunity to say, all right, he was worthy of a third round pick. I like him coming out of South Carolina. I like him a little bit better than Gervon Dexter coming out of South Carolina. But so to this point, injuries happened, kind of curtailed his start there to his career. And then that weird thing last year, we still don't have a reason in terms of why this kid was inactive. So, I think this is his chance at new staff, new regime. Go put your best foot forward. And they have no, in terms of no ties to him. So if Ben Johnson or Dennis Allen says I don't want him, he's gone. So I think Zach Pickens, it behooves him to come to camp motivated, in shape, ready to go, go and put his best foot forward here and try and impress this new staff.
Yeah, he needs to impress the Bears fans too, that's for sure. Vince wants your evaluation of Mason Graham, the defensive tackle out of Michigan. He's got the short arms, but he's got the quickness. I see a little of Aaron Donald in him, but more importantly, what do you see?
I don't go that far. I don't go Aaron Donald, but I do see a three technique. I see a guy that's more quicker than fast. My thing with Mason Graham, I go back and forth, and my question is, I think the upside for his teammate Kenneth Grant is a higher upside than Mason Graham. I think you draft Mason Graham, I think he's a guy that come in, he can be a good starter for you. My only concern is he maxed out? Is there, his frame is not that big. Could he put on more weight? Can he get bigger? Is he a guy that's going to be able to hold up in the trenches? Now he does a great job in terms of playing at Michigan in the Big Ten, taking on double teams and being able to again get into that gap and get up and make some things happen there. But obviously his stats weren't there. He doesn't have big sack numbers or anything like that. So I think you draft Mason Graham, I think he'll be a solid player for you. You draft Kenneth Grant, he's a guy you might have to wait on. He's only 21 years old, but his upside, his return on that pick could be higher than what Mason Graham is. My fear is Mason Graham maxed out? Is this the best he can be? That's one thing that's my biggest fear with Mason Graham. But again, will be a solid player. But in terms of like you said, Aaron Donald, like I don't see that. I don't see that with Mason Graham.
Yeah, what I see out of the comparison with Graham and Donald is the quickness factor, is that they are similar size and they win with their quickness. You'd look at the sizes of both Aaron Donald and Mason Graham years ago, and you would have said, no, I don't want, a guy that size to play defensive tackle. And so these guys overcome that with electrifying quickness. And of course, Donald was a workout warrior. This is a great story. Just real quick. This is a great story where some kid was part of the Make-A-Wish Foundation thing, and they went over to the Rams, and his wish was to spend the week with Aaron Donald because that was his idol. And so this kid who had been on chemotherapy for like 12 weeks prior to visiting with Aaron Donald has him running and doing exercises and lifting weights and so forth. And one of the players, I forgot who it was, said to Aaron Donald, the poor kid is going to throw up. He's been on chemo for 3 months. And he goes, hey, you're going to hang out with Aaron? You're going to work out
like Aaron. Yeah. I'd probably pass on throw if I was working out with Aaron Donald. That's for sure. But the one difference there is with Aaron Donald. Yeah, he was smaller, but he was quick. I mean, he was lightning quick. I remember those Senior Bowl practices. I mean, he was unblockable down there in Mobile. So, and the production was also there too with Aaron Donald. So I think he was more that tailor-made three technique, and the biggest thing by him was, I believe, was his short arms. I think he had shorter arms than what Mason Graham came in as. So that's the one thing there with Aaron Donald. But man, his 10-yard split. Now, obviously, Mason Graham didn't work out, but you put on his tape in Michigan. And again, some of it is probably the scheme that they have him play in Michigan, more of that two gapping stuff, as opposed to getting up the field. And again, I think he'll be a fine starter for you on defensive line. I'm just worried about in terms of what is his ceiling. Has he matched his ceiling? Is there any room to get better? Bigger and more impactful at the defensive front. Whereas opposed to Grant, I like a little bit more in terms of his ability. Only 21 years old. I think he's going to get better. He's got to work on his body a little bit. But man, some of the quickness he shows for that big of a size, it really intrigues me with Kenneth Grant, his teammate.
We had just finished talking about Zach Pickens, and Vince had a follow-up. He wants to know from you, what is it exactly that Pickens needs to improve on?
Well, Vince, apparently everything, because like I said, he wasn't even dressed when he was healthy last. He was a healthy scratch, inactive last year. So that's the one thing is I'm not sure if there's off the field stuff. Obviously, early on it was some injuries, some hip stuff that he had some problems with, but could never really kind of recover from that. Never really, you'd see him here and there get a snap here and there, but never really, took off from there. So I don't know if it's something that where it's off the field stuff in terms of his, conditioning or taking his job seriously. That's something I don't have the answer to. But in terms of his size and the length, and he fits the profile that Dennis Allen likes. Like I said, coming out of South Carolina, you ran a 1.62 10-yard split, which is what you want in those, in that kind of a range for a defensive tackle. So, physically and athletically, it looks like he's got everything. Maybe it's just putting it all together. Maybe it's something where, he just didn't jive with the previous coaching staff. So that's why it's a clean slate for him now. Be prepared for training camp. Bring your best foot forward. And then for Zach Pickens, it's your shot to make this roster. If not, you'll probably be cut and looking for a job for somewhere else.
Yeah, and what I've heard about Zach Pickens is that, he's just not getting it in the classroom and transferring what he does learn in the classroom onto the football field. I don't think that there's any problems with his, behavior or anything like that. He's just not quite getting it. And hopefully, Dennis Allen can unlock some of that, and having a veteran like Grady Jarrett could help him as well.
That's the thing is Grady Jarrett can help a lot of these young guys with some of the expertise in terms of just technique or just what to look for and keys you can read on offensive linemen. So that's the kind of thing that was missing, right? Andrew Billings was a good veteran, but he wasn't the productive pass rusher that a Grady Jarrett is. So I think that's something where Jarrett could help these young kids out.
Okay. Slick says, I still want Gray Zabel at some point. Do you think Gray Zabel falls to number 39 or 41? And would you like to pick him up?
He's getting a lot of love right now. I mean, obviously mock drafts are they are what they are right now. But I mean, if you look now, he's going mid-teens. So, if these guys are actually, talking to NFL people are telling me this is going to go. I mean, that's typically how these mock drafts are done, right? So, I don't think he falls to the 39th pick, but man, if he's there, talk about a guy you can bring in. I love Gray Zabel. I think he's a guard / center. And that's where he's gonna play in the next level. So I talk about a guy who could be multi, position backup. Learn from a guy like Joe Tooney, right? So if you're gonna make him a center, you can look from a veteran like Drew Dahlman as well. So yeah, he'd be a hell of a pickup in that top of that second round. So yeah, if he lasts, I'd be all over that. I love the kid's makeup. I love the way he plays the football game. Talked about position versatility along the offensive line. Those guys are valuable, especially on game days where you can only address a certain number of players. I think that's a guy that if he's there, I'd be all over him on top of that second round.
Indeed. A couple of guys are saying, come on, he's playing defensive tackle, referring to Zach Pickens. It's not like he has to remember a lot of plays, but there is stuff that the defensive line, in terms of stunts, in terms of reading the offensive line and the protections and so forth at the offensive line, that can help a defensive tackle, a defensive player play better. Isn't that right, Danny?
Well, yeah, there are games and loops and stunts that they play up front, but it typically with Eberflus's system, I mean, for the four guys, because he didn't want to slow them down at all, so he wanted them going after the quarterback. From what I heard, it was not a very complicated scheme to run. So that's why it's when you said that earlier, I'm like it's basically see quarterback, get quarterback, right? So I'm not sure what Pickens wasn't picking up in that defense, but yeah, it's not very complicated in terms of that Tampa 2 for the front four guys.
Okay. Loco says, would you guys consider trading out of the first round this year altogether and get future first and twos next year? That's an interesting question, one that I haven't even entertained in my mind, just getting completely out of the first round. With this draft and the talent and the talent level, it's a really, really interesting question. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, getting a first and 2 second rounds, 2 seconds next year in 2020. Yeah, I mean, it's obviously because every team has their first round pick, so there isn't a team that's missing a first round pick. So if this scenario plays out, it's basically someone that's trying to jump back into the first round, maybe for a quarterback, maybe for whatever position that they're lacking. So we've seen things happen, right? We've seen where I think it was the Texans, right, a couple years ago, right? They came back in and were able to get number 2 and number 3, where they got C.J. Stroud and Will Anderson. So if a team says, all right, I need, for example, let's just throw a team out there, Cleveland, right? Number 2, they want Cam Ward, but he's gone number 1. So, the next best quarterback is I don't know, Shedeur Sanders, but they don't want to pass up on, Travis Hunter. That could see a scenario where, all right, we'll take Travis Hunter number 2, and then we'll see how far we can wait until, Shedeur is available, and then we'll jump back in. And in this scenario that JoJo plays out here, maybe that could happen. But it's hard to predict. Obviously, there's got to be a player, and there's got to be a team that falls in love with that said player, and that's typically what happens. And trades like that is usually for quarterbacks. I mean, that's what those kind of trades are for. So, Cam Ward and obviously Shedeur are the top 2 from what everything. And I haven't even dived into the quarterbacks because I know the Bears are not going to draft the quarterback, so I haven't even wasted time in looking at the quarterbacks. But from what everything you hear now, it's Cam Ward's going to go number 1 in Tennessee. Shedeur could drop anywhere from 2 to 10 to 15, who knows? And there's Jackson Dart, I think is climbing up there, and then there's this kid Tyler Shuck from Louisville, 25 years old, has really dealt with some injuries and played at Texas Tech, a couple of different universities. He's really kind of, that Senior Bowl for him really kind of, started his path up, and he had a great combine. So, we could have 1, maybe 3 quarterbacks taken in the first round. We could have just 1 quarterback taken in the first round. It's so unpredictable with this draft. So we'll see how it goes. But yeah, that kind of trade would be for a quarterback, and I just don't know if there's a quarterback in this draft that teams will give up that kind of haul for.
Well, let me present one scenario. Samo asked the question, who's going to give us that deal? Or even better, what player is worth that trade at 10? It's highly unlikely that's going to happen. But one potential scenario could be Shedeur Sanders dropping to number 10 and the Pittsburgh Steelers, who don't have a starting quarterback on their roster. They are said to be trying to allure Aaron Rodgers. And if they do, Aaron Rodgers is not going to be the starting quarterback in 2026 or 2027. So Shedeur Sanders could be a guy that the Steelers might be interested in trading up to 10 to get a Sanders. Other than that, I can't off the top of my head think of any other scenarios, but the idea of trading out of the first round altogether is intriguing.
Yeah, there is one scenario, one team that I could see. I don't know about giving up that haul, but I could see coming back into the first round to get Shedeur, and that'd be the Raiders. Tom Brady and Shedeur have a close friendship relationship. Obviously, they just traded for Geno Smith with Pete Carroll there. Geno Smith is going to be a short-term bridge quarterback, and so if you bring in a Shedeur Sanders, you can have him sit behind Geno Smith and for a year or two and learn, and then eventually take over. And I think obviously Tom Brady is heavily involved. This is the first minority owner I've ever seen that's so damn heavily involved in the team and what they do. So I think that's a possibility where, because from what all I think here right now is that Jeanty is not getting past the Raiders. Now, it could be a smokescreen. Who knows? But if they go Jeanty at 6 and they want to come back and get Shedeur and he's there at 10 and the Bears get a second round this year and a first round next year. So now the Bears are out of the first round entirely. They have 3 second round picks and 2 first round picks next year. That might be a scenario that could play out for you if the Raiders feel that much for Shedeur Sanders. So we'll see.
Yeah, I these are things that I really love about the game of football in the offseason is looking at the different type of scenarios, and you have to entertain the most outlandish ones because you got to be prepared for the stuff that you're not prepared. Ryan Post talked about a book that he read, and I'm forgetting the title. I ordered the book to just kind of breeze through it, and it's all about anticipating potential problems or challenges down the line. So you're not immediately reacting to it when it happens. Oh my gosh, this guy fell to us at 10, or oh my gosh, this happened, and now you're on a 7-alarm fire trying to deal with the issue. But if you've talked about it, if you've got some preparation already done for something that's unforeseen, it's good management.
And typically a lot of these guys, these teams, they do their homework. So for example, if the Raiders were thinking about doing something like this, they'll kind of, they won't say, hey, we're going to get Shedeur Sanders. They'll be like, hey, is your pick available? What would you want to possibly trade out? And they kind of lay the weeds in terms of have an idea in terms of what it would take for the Bears to get out of the first round entirely. And then they would kind of go back and say, all right, is this player X worth this haul that we got to give this team? If not, now the Raiders are playing a game where, all right, we're not gonna, Chicago wants too much. We're gonna wait. Let's see. Will he drop to say, 12 is Dallas? Dallas is not gonna take Shedeur Sanders. Dallas, hey, what would you want to drop out of, get out of the? So this stuff is going on, as we speak here. So these teams have an idea what it's gonna take to do what they needed to do to go up and get that player, and then at that point they gotta make a decision. Hey, is this worth doing or not?
Yeah, indeed. All right. Danny Mallis a while back asked for your scouting opinion on Kevin Winston Jr. out of Penn State, guy we just mentioned about 20 minutes ago.
Yeah, Danny, first of all, great name. Second of all, I haven't gotten Kevin Winston Jr. yet. I'm slowly getting into the safeties now. I was trying to finish up all the offensive, defensive linemen. I waited for the free agency right now. I'm going to finish up my defensive linemen, and then I'm going to hit the safeties and along with linebackers and tight ends and running backs. So I will give you a scouting report on Winston Jr. Our next show, which I believe is in a couple of weeks, if I'm not mistaken.
That's
correct. Go to keep checking Shimon Draft Scout, subscribe, like, and then I tweet out whenever I put up a scouting report out there. So follow me on X as well at dshimon56, and then you'll see me tweet out the report that's new, that's available on Shimon Draft Scout. And then you can read it over there. But I will be looking at Kevin Winston Jr.
Awesome. I know you've looked at Derek Harmon. Flex Diggs wants to know your thoughts on the
Flex Diggs. Derek Harmon is coming up by end of this week. I'll have a scouting report, a full detailed scouting report. But yeah, he's a guy that intrigues me. You talked about, Dennis Allen likes the size and the length stuff. He's got it. Former Michigan State transfer, went to Oregon, had a pretty good year. Took that combine, really had experience and that really showed out there at the combine as well. So Derek Harmon intrigues me. He's a fit for this scheme as well. So he's a guy that I will look to have his report posted by end of this week. So go ahead and follow me, and then when that's available, I will post it as well. Thanks, J2K. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah, nice job, J2K. Really appreciate that. Cliff says, you better hurry up. You only got 6 weeks. You got a lot of
well, Cliff, I'm not studying every single position. I'm studying specifically guys that fit the Bears scheme. So that's why I'm going, detail by detail, guys that I feel like, for example, there's a lot of guys that I get James Pierce, right? Edge rusher from Tennessee. Yeah. Ran a 4.47 at 245 pounds, 32-inch arms. He's not a fit. He's a guy that Dennis Allen will not play because he's a guy that doesn't play the run well. So I'm looking at guys that fit the scheme, fit what the coaching staff wants, and specifically a position of need. So that's why I kind of concentrate on an area, a position in an area of need.
Yeah. And I'll tell you one thing about Danny is, we do our live draft show the last 4 or 5 years together, and he is always the most frustrated guy because somebody might ask him a question about a prospect that he hasn't done, and it just breaks his heart that he hasn't been able to anticipate that. But you just can't do all of these players.
Usually that happens on day 3 is where I'm like, he's a safety from, East Valley State.
Now, let me ask you this. Had you done any work on Adam Shaheen when Ryan Pace drafted him in the second round?
I know.
I saw
I don't even think NFL had done work on Adam Shaheen.
Really. And then,
why do you run Shaheen when you can get George Kittle, it's 5 picks later or something like that, right?
We have to remind ourselves of how bad it was because it's going to get better. All right. Dr. Truth asks, I'd be fascinated to see the impact Jarrett has on a player like Shamar Stewart if the Bears somehow ended up drafting him. Now, Stewart is a defensive end, but what have you heard about Stewart's mind? And, is he not getting the sack totals because maybe he's not the kind of guy who has a love for the game?
I haven't had a chance to sit down and obviously interview with Shamar Stewart, but in terms of just his tape and his physical attributes, I mean, he has that, the 6'5", the 34-inch arms, 267 pounds, 270 pounds of what he came in at the combine. The guy is physically gifted. Athletically, he's gifted. He looks the part, right? That's what you want in your defensive end. But we talk about him is the production. 4.5 sacks, in his career in college. You put on his tape, and man, I always talk about grading the flashes. See when he flashes, man, his flash looks spectacular, but he doesn't finish. And that's the one thing with Shamar is he hasn't been able to finish. Now, sometimes you notice some little lower body stiffness in terms of being able to kind of quick change of direction. So there's times he misses a sack because the quarterback kind of juked him real quick, or he just doesn't wrap up and get a tackle for loss. So his thing is production, and he hasn't been able to finish. But he went down in the Senior Bowl and he put on a show in those one-on-ones, right? And then he's gone to the combine. He's put on an athletic display as well. So I think what he's done so far, I think he's cemented himself in the first round, maybe mid to late first round. So I don't know, that could be a player in your scenario, although where you say you trade down, you take a chance on a player like that. But in terms of what's in his head, that's all things you need to kind of sit down and talk to him and interview him. And I don't know, I'm not even sure if he's coming in for a 30 visit or not here with the Bears, but I'm pretty sure that they met with him at the combine. I'm pretty sure they met with him at the Senior Bowl. So we'll see there. But yeah, his thing is physically he's got everything. Athletically, he's got everything you want. It's just the production hasn't been there. And then that's where you got to say why. And, you sit him down, you break down his tape and say, what happened here? What happened there? And that's where you get a better, inside look in terms of the player, in terms of his, his ability to process, play speed and all that stuff. So,
all right. I want to make sure to get this question in because Sam was asked it a couple of times. He's asking if you agree that Nick Scorton is the best defensive end fit for ability and for Dennis Allen's, what he usually has in a defensive end in terms of size. Now, I can tell you that Scorton is 6'3" and weighs 260 pounds. Is that the kind of DE Allen is looking for?
That size is okay. I think he's got 33 or 34-inch arms. Yes, Samuel. So to answer your question, I believe Nick Scorton is the guy behind Mykel Williams in terms of what would fit the Dennis Allen scheme. So he's a guy that I'm going to also post up a report on him here shortly as well. But he would be my next guy, and he's a guy that is dropping to probably in that second round ranges from what you hear all the stuff going on here right now. So he's a guy that could possibly be there if you don't get an end in the first round, maybe top of that second round. Nick Scorton could be a guy that can fit there. But yeah, I think he fits. I think he fits that scheme. He's not the ideal fit, but I think he fits in terms of physicality. He's a guy. Run defense isn't the greatest, but again, his thing is getting after the quarterback, being physical at the line of scrimmage. So I think that behind Mykel Williams, I think he's probably the next best fit, if you will, at defensive end.
All right, let's get to my buddy Stephen Nagishi's question here. Any edge rusher you like for the Bears? I mean, obviously we talked about Nick just now. He goes on to say, it seems like there are smallish guys which don't fit Allen's traits.
Exactly.
That seems to be the majority of the defensive ends that are rated high.
There are guys that are, quick twitch, like for me, they look a lot more like outside linebacker, like a James Pierce Jr. or, Green from Marshall, guys like that. But yeah, Mykel Williams, Steven is my top guy in terms of fit, in terms of player as well. Nick Scorton is another one. Let me take a look at the list here I have for defensive ends as well. But I mean, in terms of like the first, obviously we talked about Shamar Stewart. He's a guy that fits the profile athletically and physically. It's just the production hasn't been there at Texas A&M. So, Donovan Azubuike from Boston College doesn't have the height. He's only 6'2". He looks like an outside linebacker, but he's got the 34-inch arms, and you see him kind of present some of that in terms of using his length to be able to get after offensive tackles. So, but doesn't have this entire complete package, if you will. So he's an outside shot, but a lot of teams like him as a 3-4 outside linebacker. So we'll see there as well. But, if you get later on in the draft, there's a couple of guys that don't have necessarily the first step quickness, or they might have the size and the length, but don't have the actual production. Like, JT Tuimoloau from Ohio State is a guy, fits the profile, tough, hard-nosed player, but not the first step, explosive edge quickness you're looking for. So he might be a rotational guy, and then eventually they can work with him and work on his technique and get him better that way. But but in terms of guys that are explosive, get after the quarterback, can be impactful, first, second year of their career. Michael Williams, Nick Scoren are a couple of names that I come to the top of my mind right.
Yeah. J2K writes about Ashton Gelati as a fit with his play, but not his size.
I don't think so. Ashton Gelati is not a fit, J2K. He's a guy that came in at, I think, 6'3", 6'4", 260, but he's got 31-inch arms. There's no way Dennis Allen's going to want a 31-inch arm edge rusher coming in. He's a guy another one that a lot of teams are talking about kicking outside as a 3-4 outside linebacker. So he's not in my opinion, he's not a fit for the scheme.
Steven brings up another Shamir, but this one is Shamir Turner from Texas A&M. Any thoughts on that?
Twitchy, quick interior defensive lineman. Really athletic. He's a guy that can really get up into those gaps. So, but he's a guy more like in that second, third round range. Not someone that, for me at least, it would be in the first round.
All right. I think we're ready to shut this one down, Danny. Anything else that you would love to share with the audience before we start talking about Shimon Draft Scout, the YouTube page?
No, in terms of just this whole start of this process with free agency, I think it's a great start. I do wonder. There's a name that I wanted to throw out there. I'm not sure if the Bears are interested in him or not, but I think would be a nice little toy for Ben Johnson. That's Kyle Juszczyk, the 49er that got cut. And I know he's a fullback, one of the best fullbacks in football. I think he's got some good football left in him. I went back. Ben Johnson didn't really use a lot of fullback back in Detroit. There was Jason Cabinda, I think it was, from Penn State, was used as a fullback, but that was a couple of years ago. So will he use? But the thing with Juszczyk, he can be used as an H-back. He can be used as a tight end. He can be used in multiple different ways. Obviously, you talked about him being able to do the blocking and all that stuff. So I'm curious if that's someone that they would bring him in. So we'll see. But that's a name that came out. Cooper Kupp is a guy that kind of intrigues me. It's not the same player that he was before. So it all depends on how much he's going to get in the open market. Sounds like he's got a huge market. So his price might be out there. But with being another receiver, I think him specifically, Cooper Kupp is the route running, something that Roma Dunze could look at. We talked about how Grady Jarrett could help the young guys in the defensive line room, how Joe Tooney can help the young guys in the offensive line room. I think a guy like Cooper Kupp could really help a Roma Dunze and some of the other young guys in terms of route recognition, running their routes, what to look for, how to set up defensive backs, and he blocks, right? You mentioned it a couple weeks ago, no block, no rock, right? That's Ben Johnson saying, and Cooper Kupp blocks. So, that's a guy that I would like to bring him in because they need a receiver. I think they're going to draft a receiver. They'll bring in a veteran as well. Tim Patrick is a guy we've talked about, former Bronco, had a couple bad injury seasons there, ended up going to Detroit last year, really was productive for them in the slot. Another one that will block. So that could be a name to keep an eye on as well. But I think that the Jets are after him as well with Aaron Glenn. And obviously, Aaron Glenn's offensive coordinator was the former Detroit passing game coordinator. So there's familiarity there as well. So we'll see. But I would look for a receiver next in free agency, some sort of type of veteran, and we'll see what else they attack. But yeah, it's a good start. I love the start in terms of the offensive line, defensive line, but we cannot relax. We cannot stop. We've got to keep fortifying, bring in depth. I like to see Matt Pryor re-signed. Hopefully, he'll be a nice swing tackle. Guy that can play either side. Can also play multiple positions on the offensive line as well. So now it's time to fortify your lines with some depth and some guys that can come in and compete and give the starters a run for their money.
Cliff is asking, Kupp would fit right in, but how much money? And DeAndre Hopkins today signed a contract for 1 season, $6 million. I got to believe that Kupp is probably going to sign a similar contract given the fact that he has missed 18 games out of the last 50 over the past 3 seasons.
If that's true, I would do that for Kupp. Mm-hmm. I would. I thought it'd be more. I thought it'd be more in like the 12 to 15 range, that's what I thought he would get. Because what did Devontae Adams get from the Rams? Do you guys know?
Like $30 million or something like that.
Yeah, so I thought maybe Kupp would get something like that as well. And I know the injury the last couple of years is a bit, but if it's a 1 year $6 million or something like that, I definitely wouldn't bring back Keenan Allen. It's like I personally I wouldn't bring him back either. I wouldn't bring him back, but yeah, I mean, if it's 1 year, $6 million, 1 year, $10 million for Kupp, I would give it a shot. I mean, I think he would help that receiver room.
Yeah,
immensely.
Definitely. Yeah, Dr. True says no thanks on Keenan. We've moved past that. All right, let's remember it is the YouTube page for Danny is Shimon Draft Scout. It's all one word. So I'm going to show you something here. When you go to YouTube, when you're on YouTube and you type in Shimon Draft Scout, one word, this is what you're going to see. Near the top or at the top, you're going to see Danny's site. You just click that on and you go straight to Danny's site. And there you see all of the videos that he's been creating. I can't wait. I probably
Walter Nolan is coming out tomorrow, guys. So Ole Miss defensive tackle, Walter Nolan, he'll be up there tomorrow.
Yeah, can't wait to get through some more of these. I've got probably, I would say 6 or 7 of these, but definitely will watch all of them as you continue posting on there. Let's see. Any other questions or anything? I want to thank Jason for the $5 donation to the bar room, and I think that's it. We will leave it there. Danny Shimon, a final word for a shout out to anybody?
No, I just appreciate everyone's following me on the YouTube page and all the comments. The J2K has been a huge supporter. I appreciate that, J2K, and Aldo as well, for all your assistance and everything like that. And if there's anything, there's a shirt. There you go. If there's any players you guys want me to do, obviously Kevin Winston Jr. is a guy that came up today. As a guy I'll be doing when I start doing the safeties, but yeah, just moving forward, it'll be defensive linemen, and then we're going to do some offensive players like running backs and tight ends, and then we'll start looking at safeties and all that stuff. But if there's any player or any position you feel like you want me to go ahead and break down, you think the Bears have a need there, drop me a comment on the YouTube page or follow me on Twitter, DM me. DMs are open. Let me know who you want me to post up there, and I'll go ahead and post it. And someone's asked me for a 3-round mock draft after the free agency. And you guys know I'm not a big mock draft fan, but maybe I'll post a 3-round mock draft after kind of the first phase here of free agency and see what you guys think there as well. So look forward to that as well. But again, whenever I post on my YouTube page, I tweet it out. So if you follow me on Twitter, you'll see the notification, or if you follow me, or if you subscribe to my YouTube page, you'll get the notification there as well. So appreciate all the support, appreciate all the encouraging words, and let me know how else I can make it better for you guys.
Sounds great, Danny. You're the man. Many thanks to Danny Shimon and everyone in the chat room who helps makes this show as enjoyable as it is. We will I'm taking a day off tomorrow, but we'll be back here behind the scenes working with the Willis twins, and I think Mac and Reed will have a show tomorrow. And the Barfly Tailgaters are talking about coming back on Sunday and reviewing what's happened with free agency. So we got a lot of content. All you have to do is subscribe to the channel, and you'll get alerts on your devices.
One thing I want to I'm proud of the Bears fans that are pumped up and excited about us getting offensive and defensive linemen. Yeah, it's not about the receivers, it's not about the running backs, but it's about the trenches, guys. This is what we needed, and this is what hopefully they're going to go ahead and shore this up.
Indeed, it's not always about the sexy positions. It was great seeing those big guys at Hallis Hall. This is a new era for Chicago football. We're getting back to the basics. That's how you win games and championships. All right, for Danny, I'm Aldo. Take care, everybody.